Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. I never liked camping as much as my friends did, but when you are the one who always bails, eventually you stop getting invited. So when they asked this time, I said yes right away. I thought it would be good for me. A couple of nights out in the woods, beers by the fire, no responsibilities. I kept telling myself I needed the break. It started out normal enough. We threw our stuff into the back of my friend's truck and drove for hours. The further we went, the less cell service we had, until it cut out completely. It felt like we were slowly peeling away from the world, which I guess was the point. The GPS on my phone barely held on, but it showed a spot marked as a campsite way back in the forest. Not one of the main campgrounds, but a hidden one, tucked off an old service road. My friend grinned when he saw it. Perfect, off the grid. The road narrowed into something that hardly looked like a road at all. Trees pressed in on both sides, branches scraping the truck, and I remember thinking, if we get stuck out here, no one is coming to help us. It was late afternoon by the time we finally pulled into a small clearing. The GPS showed the pin right where we were, but if not for that, you would never have guessed it was a campsite. No signs, no fire rings, nothing but a flat patch of dirt surrounded by heavy trees. We set up the tents quickly before it got dark. I tried to shake the weird feeling in my gut, chalking it up to nerves. I had not camped in years, and it felt strange being that deep in the woods, away from every familiar sound. No hum of cars, no glow of streetlights, just trees and silence. By the time we got a fire going, the unease had started to fade. We cracked open some beers, passed around a bag of chips, and settled into the rhythm of the night. My friends swapped dumb stories, half true and half exaggerated, and for a while, it almost felt like we were kids again, sneaking out and daring each other to stay in the dark longer than a minute. But every time I looked past the fire, the trees felt closer, heavier. The light from the flames made them seem alive, shadows shifting and swaying. I told myself it was just the beer. When it was time to sleep, I crawled into my tent, zipped the flap, and lay there listening to the fire crackle down to embers. My body was tired, but my mind would not shut off. I thought about how far we were from town, how my phone was useless, how no one even knew exactly where we had gone except the three of us. For some reason, that thought sat on my chest like a weight. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I unzipped the tent and stepped out into the cool air. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not just quiet, but wrong. No bird song, no insects buzzing, nothing. Just stillness. Then I saw the trail we had driven in on, or what should have been the trail. Overnight, it was blocked. Branches and logs had been dragged across the path in neat stacks, like someone had built a barrier. Rocks were piled on top of each other, deliberate, not random. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe a storm had blown things down, but there had been no storm. The sky was clear, the ground dry, and the way the branches were arranged, stacked like a wall, it was not the work of nature. When my friends woke up, I pointed it out, expecting them to freak out. They laughed instead, said it was probably kids, or maybe forest rangers blocking off a trail that was not meant to be used. They brushed it off, but I could not. The nearest town was miles away. What kids would be out here in the middle of the night dragging logs around? We tried to find another way out, but every path we walked ended the same way, blocked with piles of branches or carefully stacked rocks. Each one felt like it had been arranged with intention, like someone wanted us to know we were not supposed to leave. By midday, my nerves were raw. We argued about whether to stay or push through the barriers. My friends said we would deal with it in the morning, that we should just enjoy the trip. I agreed out loud, but inside, I felt trapped. That night, As we sat around the fire again, the air felt heavier. The silence pressed in, thicker than before. My friend cracked a joke about Bigfoot, but no one laughed. The fire popped, sparks drifting into the dark, and for a long while, no one spoke. When it was time to turn in, I lay in the tent staring at the nylon ceiling, my ears strained for sound. That was when I heard it. A faint whistle, not like a bird, not random. It was deliberate, 3 short notes, drifting through the trees. I held my breath. The sound circled the camp, moving slowly, always just far enough away to keep me guessing. My dog barked once, sharp and nervous, then went silent again, pressing against me like he wanted to crawl inside my skin. I wanted to believe it was the wind, some trick of the forest, but deep down I knew better. The whistling moved like it had purpose, like someone was walking a slow circle around our tents. I lay there all night, too afraid to sleep, staring at the thin fabric wall between me and whatever was out there. Every time the whistle faded, I thought it was gone, only for it to start again minutes later. By morning it was silent again. My friends acted like nothing had happened, but I could tell they had heard it too. None of us said a word as we sat around the cold fire pit, sipping burnt coffee from tin mugs. We all kept glancing at the blocked trail, at the woods beyond, each of us waiting for someone else to admit that something was wrong. But no one did, and that was somehow worse. The second morning felt worse than the first. I had not slept at all after the whistling. Every rustle of leaves, every shift of fabric in the tent made my heart jump. When I finally crawled out into the pale light, my friends were already up, sitting around what was left of the fire. Neither of them said anything, just sipped their coffee with blank expressions. I knew right then they had heard the whistling too. None of us wanted to be the first to admit it. I made myself busy, poking at the ashes with a stick, pretending not to notice the way the air felt heavy again. The forest should have been alive with birds and insects in the morning, but it was just silent. Too silent. I tried to tell myself it was normal, maybe just a quirk of the area, but deep down I felt the truth pressing against me. Something was wrong with this place. We decided to try another route out, even if it meant hiking miles through the trees without a real trail. One of my friends pulled out a compass, and we picked a direction, thinking if we went straight long enough we would eventually hit the service road. At first it felt like a good idea. The air was cooler under the trees, and for a while I could almost forget the dread from the night before. But within an hour, we found another barrier. Not branches this time, but rocks. Dozens of them stacked waist-high, arranged carefully across the path like a wall. They were balanced so neatly that when my friend shoved at one, the whole pile collapsed in a crash of stone. The sound echoed through the forest, and for a moment, we all froze. It felt like shouting in a cathedral, like we had broken some unspoken rule. We moved on quickly, stepping over the fallen rocks, but I could not shake the image of them stacked so deliberately. They had not been there yesterday. Someone had built them overnight, knowing we would find them. As the day dragged on, I felt eyes on us. Every time I turned, I caught only trees. My skin prickled, my stomach twisting tighter with every step. My dog was restless, ears pinned back, growling low at the empty woods. He kept looking behind us, whining, like something was trailing just out of sight. By late afternoon, we admitted defeat and circled back to camp. My legs ached, my throat was dry, but more than anything, I was exhausted from the constant edge of fear. I thought maybe if we just packed up and started driving, we could push through the blocked trail. But when we got back, the truck felt smaller, weaker, like it would not stand a chance against the walls of branches and rocks that seemed to multiply by the hour. Back at the clearing, things were not the same. The campsite looked different, like someone had been through it while we were gone. My tent flap was open, though I knew I had zipped it. A few of our bags were shifted, not rifled through, but moved, like someone had picked them up, studied them, and set them back down. That night, we sat around the fire in near silence. Every crackle of wood made me flinch. The forest pressed close, the darkness thick and complete beyond the glow of the flames. One of my friends finally spoke, his voice tight. He said maybe it was locals trying to scare us away, that some people did not like strangers in their woods. It was the most rational thing any of us had said all day, and I clung to it, even though it did not explain everything. We decided to take turns keeping watch. I got the first shift. I sat on a log with the fire hissing low, staring into the dark, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The hours stretched, and my mind wandered to every story I had ever heard about people vanishing in forests, about strange rituals and cults. I told myself over and over that it was just kids messing around. Just people. That thought was almost comforting, even if it was not true. Somewhere past midnight, the whistling started again. This time it was closer. 3 short notes, circling, drifting in and out, always moving. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I gripped the flashlight, fighting the urge to sweep it across the trees, terrified of what I might see. My friend stirred in his tent and called out, asking if I heard it too. I lied. I said it was the wind, just the wind moving through the branches. He did not believe me. I could hear it in the way he went quiet. The whistling went on for what felt like hours. Sometimes it sounded right behind me, faint but sharp, and I had to fight not to spin around. My dog pressed against my leg the whole time, trembling, his eyes locked on the dark. When my shift was over, I crawled into my tent, shaking, and tried to sleep. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I heard something new. Soft thuds, spaced evenly apart, like footsteps on the dirt. They moved around the tent, slow and deliberate, circling once, twice, then fading into the trees. I held my breath the whole time, barely daring to move. When it finally stopped, I lay awake until dawn, eyes burning, every muscle stiff from tension. In the morning, my friend shook me awake, his face pale. He said there was something I needed to see. We walked a short way into the trees, to a clearing none of us had noticed before. In the center stood dozens of rock piles, each one carefully built, balanced in eerie silence. On top of each cairn rested a skull, not human but animal. Deer, raccoon, fox, maybe even a coyote. The skulls were weathered but arranged with care, each one staring out toward the trees. I felt sick. My stomach churned, and I had to swallow hard to keep from gagging. The air felt thick, heavy with something I could not name. No one spoke. We just stood there, staring at the rows of stone and bone, the forest around us silent as a held breath. Finally, my friend muttered that we should go back, that we should pack up and get the hell out as soon as possible. But deep down, I knew it was already too late. We spent the rest of that morning in a kind of daze. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but we were rattled. The cairns with the skulls sat only a couple 100 yards from where we had slept. The idea that they had been there all along while we sat drinking around the fire made my skin crawl. Back at camp, the mood was heavy. We moved slower, quieter. Normally, packing up a campsite takes time, but when you know you should not be somewhere, it is like your body knows to hurry. We stuffed clothes into bags, broke down the tents without folding them right, crammed gear into the truck. I kept glancing at the tree line, waiting for something to step out and watch us. When the truck was loaded, we headed straight for the road we had driven in on. The plan was simple. Push through whatever barrier had been set up, even if it meant scraping the hell out of the truck. We just needed to be moving. But when we got there, the barrier was gone. The trail was clear, like it had never been blocked at all. The branches, the rocks, the logs that had been piled high across the path were nowhere in sight, just dirt and tire ruts stretching into the forest. We sat there in silence, staring. My first thought was that maybe the rangers had moved it, but that made no sense. They would not have cleared it and vanished without a word. And besides, this road was not even on a map. The idea that someone had been out here in the middle of the night, moving piles of branches as tall as a man, made my stomach twist. We drove forward, slow at first, like we expected the trail to vanish again. But nothing happened. For a mile, maybe two, the road stayed clear. That was when the engine coughed. It happened once, then again, and then the truck shuddered and died. My friend cursed, tried the ignition again, but nothing. We sat there with the hood steaming, the forest closing in on both sides, and the reality hit me like a punch. We were stranded. We popped the hood, but none of us knew enough about cars to fix whatever had gone wrong. The air smelled faintly sweet, like coolant, and the radiator hissed. My friend muttered something about it overheating, but the way the engine had died felt more final, like it had been drained. We decided to walk back to camp and figure it out later. None of us said it, but the truth hung there between us. We were being played with. Whatever or whoever was out here was not just trying to scare us. They were controlling the game. That night the fear settled in deeper. We tried to build the fire higher, like maybe light alone could protect us, but it only made the shadows dance bigger. The forest stayed silent, watching. Around midnight the whistling started again, not faint this time, close, moving around the tents, circling like before, but slower, heavier. My dog barked once, a sharp, broken sound, then cowered against me in the tent. I pressed a hand to his fur and whispered for him to be quiet, my throat so dry it hurt. Then came the sound of footsteps, bare feet on dirt, slow, dragging, circling. I wanted to unzip the tent to shine my flashlight out, but I could not move. I lay there frozen, clutching the dog, counting the seconds between each step. Somewhere to my left, fabric ripped. Not loud, but enough that I knew. One of the tents had been slashed open. I heard my friend yell, a panicked, muffled curse, and then silence. No struggle, no running, just silence. I waited, heart hammering, until I could not take it anymore. I crawled out of my tent, shaking, flashlight beam cutting into the dark. My friend's tent was torn wide open, the flap hanging like loose skin. He was standing outside, pale, eyes wide. He shook his head at me, finger pressed to his lips. We both froze as a shape moved between the trees. Not an animal. Too tall, too human. A figure, bare-chested, skin pale even in the dark, hair hanging long and tangled. It moved with a strange, jerking gait, half walking, half dragging itself. For a moment it stopped and stared at us. I swear its eyes caught the light like an animal's, reflecting white. Then it melted back into the trees. We stayed awake the rest of the night, clutching sticks like weapons, jumping at every sound. The whistling came and went, sometimes close enough I thought it was right outside the firelight. My dog whimpered until his body trembled. By dawn, we were wrecks. My friend wanted to leave on foot, to hike out no matter how long it took. The other argued it was too dangerous, that we should wait for daylight to push further down the road. I just sat there, numb, listening to them argue, because none of the options made sense. Every path out of here felt like walking into a trap. That morning, when I went to grab my pack, I noticed something I could not explain. On the dirt by my tent, clear as day, were footprints. Small ones, child-sized, bare feet pressed into the soil, circling the tent, weaving between the adult prints that had come before. My blood went cold. I called the others over, and we all stood there staring at them. Not a word between us, just that shared look of disbelief and fear. By the time the sun was high, we forced ourselves to try the truck again. Miraculously, it started. The engine roared to life like nothing had ever been wrong. We piled in fast, not even breaking down the camp fully, just shoving gear into the back and slamming the doors. As we drove, none of us spoke. Every time I glanced in the mirrors, I expected to see someone running behind us, barefoot, keeping pace with the truck. But the road stayed clear, for a while. We passed another barrier, piles of branches stacked across the trail, higher than the truck. But this time, There was a gap, just wide enough to drive through, almost like they had left it open for us. We kept going, the silence in the cab thick. By the time we made it back to the clearing, the sun was sinking again. We had not escaped. Somehow, some way, the road had looped us right back to the same camp. The fire pit was still there, cold and gray. Our torn tents, our scattered bags, everything exactly where we had left it. Only one thing was different. Right in the middle of the camp, balanced neatly on a flat rock, was a new cairn, smaller than the ones we had seen before, but unmistakably deliberate. And resting on top was not an animal skull this time. It was a knife, one of ours, placed blade up, waiting. I wish I could say we grabbed the knife, jumped in the truck, and floored it out of there. But we just stood there staring at it. It was not even one of those moments where you argue about what to do next. All of us froze, like our brains needed time to catch up. The knife had been in my pack. I remembered using it the first night to cut open a bag of jerky. Now it was here, balanced perfectly on top of a cairn that had not been there when we left. I felt something in me break a little. Up until then, I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe rangers had put up the barriers. Maybe locals were screwing with us. But standing there, staring at one of our own knives displayed like a message, I knew we were not imagining this. Someone or something was out here, watching every move we made, close enough to unzip my bag and take what they wanted. My friend muttered that we should just get in the truck and keep driving. He said if the road looped us back again, we would just keep trying until it did not. The other friend shook his head. He said we needed to stay put. That moving only made us more lost. He was pale and sweating, eyes darting between the trees like he expected something to lunge out at us. I could not take the silence of the forest anymore. It pressed down like a weight, like the trees themselves were leaning in to listen. I said I did not care where we went. I just could not stay here another night. The idea of sleeping within sight of that cairn, that knife gleaming in the low sun, made my stomach turn. But by the time we had finished arguing, the light was already fading. None of us wanted to be on the road after dark. So we built another fire, bigger than before, feeding it with every branch we could gather. The flames roared, casting wild shadows that only made the trees seem closer. The night dragged. Every time I thought the fire was dying down, I threw on more wood. None of us slept. We sat in silence, flinching at every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves. My dog pressed against me, trembling so hard I could feel it in my bones. Around midnight, the whistling started again, the same 3 notes, slow and deliberate. It circled us, drifting through the trees, sometimes faint, sometimes close enough that I thought I could feel breath on the back of my neck. My friend hissed at me not to shine my flashlight. He said he did not want to see, and honestly, neither did I. Then came the footsteps, soft, dragging, moving just beyond the firelight. I gripped a stick tight enough that the bark bit into my palms. My dog growled, low and constant, his eyes locked on the dark. Something shifted at the edge of the clearing. A figure, just outside the glow of the fire. Tall, thin, unmoving. My eyes watered from staring, trying to make sense of it. For a moment I thought maybe it was just a tree, but then it swayed, not with the wind, but forward, like it had stepped closer. I blinked, and it was gone. None of us spoke. We sat there until the fire burned down to embers, until the sky began to pale. By then my body felt hollowed out from exhaustion. Every muscle ached from sitting tense all night. When the sun finally rose, we stumbled to the truck. It started again, like before, with no problem at all. That almost scared me more than when it had died. Like whoever or whatever was out here wanted us to leave, but only when they were finished with us. We drove until the road disappeared again, blocked by another wall of branches. This one was taller, thicker, impossible to push through, and resting on top, balanced with care, was my dog's leash. I had left it in the tent. My chest went cold. my hands numb on the steering wheel. We turned back, defeated, and circled through the forest for hours. Every turn, every fork, led us back to the same place, the camp, the clearing. By afternoon, we were back at the fire pit again. Something had changed. The cairn with the knife was gone. In its place were 3 smaller cairns, each one topped with something personal: a hat, a watch, and a lighter, all ours. Items that had been zipped in our bags, now arranged carefully on display. I do not think I have ever felt fear like that. It was not just being watched. It was knowing that whatever was out here could move among us, go through our things, pick and choose what to take, and we would never know until it was too late. That night, we did not bother with the fire. We sat in the truck, doors locked, windows rolled up, clutching what little we had left. My dog paced in the back seat, whining, scratching at the glass. When the whistling came, it was louder than before, not circling, stationary, right outside the truck. 3 short notes, repeated again and again, patient and deliberate. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, whispering over and over that it was just people, just locals, that if we waited long enough the sun would come and we would leave. But even as I said it, I did not believe it. The footsteps started around 2 in the morning. Soft, barefoot, moving around the truck, slow circles, pausing now and then starting again. My friend swore under his breath, clutching the knife he had grabbed from the cairn. My other friend sat with his hands over his ears, rocking back and forth, whispering to himself. At one point, something brushed against the truck, hard enough to rock it on its tires. My dog lunged at the window, barking until his throat was raw. The figure passed by again, close enough that I saw pale skin flash in the beam of the dying flashlight. I do not know how long it went on. Hours, maybe. When the first light of dawn touched the trees, the whistling stopped. The footsteps faded. The forest went still again. When we climbed out of the truck, the ground around us was covered in footprints. Dozens of them. Bare, human, circling the vehicle over and over. Some were small, child-sized. Others were longer, wider than any foot I had ever seen. We did not talk about it. We just sat there in the silence, staring at the prints until the sun was fully up. I thought I was afraid before, but that was the moment it hit me. We were not lost in the woods. We were trapped. By the 5th day, we were ghosts of ourselves. No one slept more than an hour at a time. Our eyes were ringed with purple, our skin gray from the cold and the nerves. Even my dog was different. Normally he was hyper, tail always wagging, ready for anything. Now he just sat with his head low, ears pinned back, whining softly at things none of us could see. The forest seemed to know it had us. That morning the air felt heavier than ever. The silence had gone from strange to unbearable. No birds, no insects, not even the wind, just the occasional creak of branches that sounded more like bones snapping. Every sound made me jump, convinced it was something creeping closer. We tried to eat, but every bite turned to sawdust in my mouth. One friend barely touched his food at all. He just sat there staring at the tree line, knife clutched in his lap like he was waiting for something to step out. The other friend muttered nonstop, whispering about maps and roads, drawing lines in the dirt that never made sense. We argued again about leaving. Part of me thought we had to hike out, even if it meant walking until our legs gave out. The truck felt useless, like a cage on wheels. But the idea of walking those woods, with whatever had been circling us at night, made my chest seize. My friend with the knife swore if we just waited one more day, we would find a way. He said maybe the sun would burn off whatever this was. His voice cracked as he said it, like even he did not believe the words. When we went to gather more firewood, we found something new. About 50 feet from camp, between the trees, a fresh cairn stood. This one was taller, nearly up to my chest, stacked with stones darker than the others. On top sat something that made my stomach lurch. It was one of our shirts, folded neatly, smeared with what looked like dried mud or blood. I could not bring myself to check. We did not touch it. We just backed away and pretended we had not seen it. But the image burned into my mind, and I kept seeing it every time I closed my eyes. That night, we tried to stay in the truck again. We locked the doors, pulled the curtains we had rigged over the windows, and huddled together in silence. My dog would not stop pacing, nails clicking against the metal floor, growls rumbling low in his throat. Around midnight, the whistling started again, louder than before, not circling, just a single voice, clear and deliberate, coming from the tree line. The same 3 notes, drawn out, echoing through the clearing. My friend clapped his hands over his ears, rocking back and forth. The other gripped the knife so hard his knuckles went white. Then came the footsteps, not slow this time, fast, running, circling the truck, darting in and out of the firelight we had left smoldering. I saw shadows streak across the windows, shapes too fast to focus on. My dog went wild, barking, lunging at the glass. The truck rocked hard, once, twice, like something had slammed against it. We all shouted at once, panic flooding the cab. The windows rattled, the doors groaned. My friend screamed for me to drive, but I could not move. The keys were in my hand, but my body would not obey. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The truck went still. The whistling faded. The forest was silent again. We sat there frozen until dawn, every muscle locked, barely breathing. When the sun finally rose, I forced myself to open the door. My legs shook as I stepped out, scanning the clearing. The ground was covered in prints again, bare feet, circling the truck in overlapping rings. But this time, something was different. At the back of the truck, pressed deep into the dirt, were handprints. Dozens of them, small, child-sized hands, smeared into the soil like they had been clawing at the ground. I felt bile rise in my throat. My friend cursed under his breath, backing away like he could erase the sight from his mind. The other just collapsed onto the dirt, head in his hands, whispering that we were never getting out. I tried to rally us, tried to sound steady, but my voice shook. I said we had to leave that day, no matter what. I said if the road looped us again, we would keep driving until the truck gave out. Anything was better than another night. We packed fast, not bothering to fold anything, just shoving gear into the back. The air felt thick, heavy with something I could not name. My dog whined non-stop, pulling at his leash toward the trees like he wanted to bolt. When we climbed into the truck, my heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth as if nothing had ever been wrong. That alone was enough to send a shiver through me. It felt like permission, like we were being allowed to try again. We drove, faster than before, tires skidding on the dirt. The trees blurred past, and for a moment, hope sparked in my chest. Maybe this time we would make it out. But after an hour, the road narrowed. My stomach dropped as the same clearing came into view. The same fire pit, the same scattered gear we had left behind. Only now, the cairns had multiplied, dozens of them, some as tall as us, some small and crooked, dotting the clearing like gravestones. And on top of every single one sat something of ours. Clothes, utensils, even my friend's wallet, items we had not even realized were missing yet. We sat there in silence, staring. My dog growled low, hackles raised, eyes locked on the tallest cairn. I followed his gaze and felt my chest seize. On top of that cairn, balanced perfectly, was my camera. The lens was cracked, but the red light blinked. It was recording. I wish I could tell you that we hit reverse, spun the truck around, and found a way out of those woods. I wish I could say we fought back, or that we caught a glimpse of whoever had been toying with us. But the truth is a lot more pathetic. We sat there in that truck, staring at the clearing, staring at those cairns lined up like some kind of ritual, and not one of us could move. The camera on the tallest cairn blinked red in the early light. I felt sick, realizing it was recording us even then, capturing our frozen faces through the windshield like we were part of a show. I do not know how long we sat like that. Minutes, maybe hours. My sense of time had been shredded. Eventually, my friend snapped. He slammed his hand against the dashboard and started yelling that we had to leave. He threw the truck into gear, and we lurched forward into the clearing. My dog barked frantically, claws scraping against the seats. My other friend just muttered no over and over, like a prayer. We drove straight through the cairns. Stones tumbled, clothes scattered. Items of ours we did not even realize were missing crunched under the tires. The sound was deafening, like bones breaking. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control. But as we smashed through them, the whistling started again. Not distant this time, not circling. It was everywhere, filling the air. Dozens of voices layered on top of each other, all playing the same 3 notes in a horrible chorus. My chest clenched so tight I could barely breathe. The truck shot down the road, faster than I thought it could go, engine screaming. I gripped the wheel until my hands went numb. The trees blurred, the whistling chased us, and every shadow looked like it was about to step into the path. And then, as suddenly as it started, we burst out into sunlight. Real sunlight. Open sky above, asphalt under the tires, the unmistakable hum of real road. My friend in the passenger seat laughed, a broken, high-pitched sound that did not sound human. My other friend just sobbed quietly into his hands. We did not stop. We drove until we hit a gas station miles away. The first human faces we had seen in what felt like forever nearly brought me to tears. I remember stumbling inside, babbling nonsense to the cashier, who just stared at us like we were crazy. When I finally checked my phone, I saw something that made my stomach drop. New photos had appeared in the gallery, dozens of them, all taken while we were in the truck that night. Shots of us sleeping, huddled, pale and broken. Photos from angles that could not have been real, like someone had been sitting in the cab with us, leaning close. The last photo was of me, just me, taken from behind, like someone had been sitting in the back seat. My head was turned slightly, my mouth half open in sleep. And in the corner of the frame, just barely visible in the reflection of the window, was a pale face smiling. I deleted every photo, but I swear deleting them did not make a difference. We never talked about it again, not properly. We drove home in silence, dropped each other off like strangers. The friendship did not survive whatever happened in those woods. I still get the occasional message from one of them, usually late at night, usually just a few words. Do you hear it too? Or, do you think it's over? I never answer. I moved apartments within the month. I sold most of my camping gear, got rid of the truck. I tell myself I am done with the woods, that I will never go back. But the truth is, it followed me. Not in the way you are thinking. I do not see pale figures in my hallway or footprints in my yard. Nothing like that. But some nights, around 3 in the morning, I wake up with my heart pounding, ears straining, certain I am about to hear that sound, that 3-note whistle. And once, just once, I swear I actually did. It came from outside my window, faint and patient, like it had all the time in the world. I did not look. I stayed under the blanket, frozen, every muscle locked until the sun came up. By morning, there was nothing there. No prints, no cairns, no sign at all. But I know what I heard. I have not been camping since. I do not go near the woods, not even a hiking trail, not even the edge of town where the trees start to thicken. The thought alone makes my chest tight. People laugh when I tell them why, so mostly I just say, I am not outdoorsy. It is easier than explaining. Sometimes I wonder if it is still out there, waiting for someone else to wander in. Maybe it was never about us. Maybe it was just the place itself, the forest, that wanted to keep us. Or maybe it is not done. Maybe it is still watching, still waiting, still circling closer every time I close my eyes. I do not know. What I do know is this: when I lie awake at night, listening to the silence, I still hear it in my head. That whistle, those bare feet dragging across dirt, the sound of rocks being stacked with careful, patient hands. And I know deep down that if I ever hear it again for real, there will be no escaping a second time. I hadn't talked to Craig since high school, and even then, talked was generous. He was more of a peripheral person in my life, a friend of a friend, someone who was always around but never central. We had a couple classes together, maybe a few mutual parties. I remember him mostly as that kid who laughed too loud, always had something to prove, and somehow knew everything about everyone. So when he messaged me out of nowhere, nearly 10 years later, I was surprised. It was one of those casual Facebook messages, the kind you glance at and almost ignore. Craig T. Hey man, I think we used to run in the same circles. You still in town? I didn't see any harm in replying. I had just moved back to my hometown after years away. Work fell through in the city, rent got ridiculous, and I figured coming back would give me a chance to regroup. I was between jobs doing some contract design work from home. Most of my old friends had moved on, or at least moved out, so I was open to reconnecting. We grabbed a beer that Friday, some dive bar off Main Street I hadn't been to since college. Craig was different than I remembered, or maybe just older. He still talked a lot, but now there was a weird kind of charm to it, like he'd been through things and come out with stories. He was intense, sure, but he was funny too. Charismatic in that way people are when they seem completely unfiltered. We talked for a few hours about jobs, relationships, old classmates, the usual surface level stuff. He said he was working in private logistics, which sounded vague, but I didn't push. He asked if I still saw anyone from back in the day. I told him no, not really. He nodded, grinned. Then I guess I'm your oldest friend now. It was a joke, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, we started hanging out more. Nothing crazy bar meetups, backyard beers, occasional dinners when I felt like cooking, and he didn't feel like eating alone. He always brought something, a 6-pack, takeout, once even a bag of steaks he got cheap from a guy at work. I appreciated the company. Living alone, especially in a town that used to feel like home but didn't anymore, gets heavy fast. But after a while, I started noticing things. He'd show up unannounced. Not often, but just enough to be unsettling. Once on a Sunday morning, I opened the door in my boxers thinking it was a delivery, and found Craig standing there, holding 2 coffees like we had plans. Figured you'd be up, he said. Didn't want these to go to waste. I hadn't heard from him in 2 days. Another time I came home from the grocery store and found him in my backyard, feet up on the patio table, smoking a cigarette. I was in the area, he said, grinning like this was normal. And maybe it would have been if we were tighter friends, but we weren't. He started asking more personal questions too. What time I went to bed, if I still locked the windows upstairs, what I did when I couldn't sleep. I laughed some of them off, gave vague answers, but I was starting to feel observed. I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to assume anything. People drift in and out of your life all the time. Maybe he was lonely too. Then came the night he stayed over. We were drinking more than usual. He brought some whiskey he said he'd been saving, and we polished off most of the bottle between the two of us. I offered the couch. He accepted. Around 2 a.m., I crashed in my room. He was still up, watching something on TV. I heard the volume low through the wall. When I woke up the next morning, he was gone. At first, I thought nothing of it. The blanket was folded on the couch, the empty bottle left on the counter. But then I noticed my spare house keys. The ones I kept in the drawer near the front door were missing. I texted him, casually. Me. Hey, good seeing you last night. You grabbed my spare keys by accident. Craig. Nope, didn't even know you had those. Maybe check your coat pockets. I thought I saw you digging through them. I checked. They weren't there. I didn't press the issue. Maybe I misplaced them. But something in his reply felt rehearsed. That was a week ago. 3 nights later, around 3:15 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Not loud, not obvious. Just a shift in the air, a creak, something that pulled me from sleep with that cold, slow dread that wraps around your spine before you're even awake enough to understand it. I lay there in the dark, listening. Nothing. Then the next day, I decided to check my security camera footage. I'd set up a cheap indoor cam 6 months earlier, mostly because of porch pirates. It wasn't fancy motion alerts, cloud saves, night vision. One angle, straight from the bookshelf across the living room. I pulled it up on my laptop. There, at 3 a.m., motion triggered. I pressed play. The footage showed my front door slowly opening. Craig stepped inside. He didn't flick on the lights. Didn't hesitate. He just walked through the living room, slowly, scanning, looking around like he was taking inventory. He didn't touch anything. Didn't take anything. Just stood in the center of the room, hands in his jacket pockets. Then, after maybe a minute, he turned and walked back out. I watched the clip 3 times. Each time, my heart pounded a little harder. I didn't remember dreaming anything that night. Didn't remember waking up, but he'd been there. In my house. While I slept. That was 3 days ago. I haven't heard from him since. And now, every night, I hear something. A door settling. A floorboard shifting. A whisper of air from a vent that suddenly feels like breath. Nothing in the house is out of place. Nothing is missing. But I swear, something's watching me. From inside. Since I watched the footage, I haven't been the same. I keep the lights on longer, double-check the windows, triple-check the doors, and still I don't sleep. That first night after seeing Craig on the camera, I sat in the living room with every lamp turned on, back to the wall, just watching. I didn't even realize I'd been holding a hammer in my hand until I dropped it out of sheer exhaustion around 4 in the morning. It's not that I'm afraid of him in the he might hurt me kind of way. At least, not yet. It's the not knowing what he wants, the intrusion. The fact that he walked into my house like he belonged there, not to steal, not to confront, just to be inside. Like he was inspecting something he already owned. The next morning, I texted him again. I kept it neutral. Me. Hey man, weird question. Did you stop by the other night? No response. 4 hours passed. Me. Craig? Still nothing. I stared at my phone all day. The text turned from delivered to read, and he never answered. By afternoon, I'd had enough. I called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation. A man entered my house without permission, didn't take anything, but I had footage. I emailed it in while the officer on the phone took notes. His voice was calm, but I could tell he thought I was overreacting. Technically, if he had access to a key, and there are no signs of forced entry, it's murky. Still, someone will follow up. Do you know him well? No, that's the problem. Do you feel threatened? I paused. I don't know. I just feel watched. He told me someone would be in touch. That was it. The next night, I didn't wait to see if Craig would return. I left the house around 7 and checked into a cheap motel off the interstate. The kind where the front desk doesn't ask questions and the curtains don't quite reach the edges of the window. I used a fake name. Paid in cash. It felt paranoid, but the longer I sat in that room, the more I realized how far this had gotten under my skin. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the camera app again. Nothing new. I flipped back to the night Craig entered, pausing frame by frame. And that's when I saw it. In the background, barely visible, the hall closet door. It was open a crack when Craig walked in, closed when he left. I rewound, watched again. Open at 3 a.m. Closed at 5. But he never touched it. I watched his hands the whole time. They stayed in his pockets, never moved, not once. I rewound again. Open. Then closed. And something else. The faintest flicker, maybe a shadow, maybe a trick of the grainy feed, but I could swear something moved behind that door. I didn't go back to the house the next day. I called in a locksmith, had the entire system replaced, all the doors, all the locks, even the garage. I wanted no trace of the old keys, no chance of access. I watched from my car as they worked. The locksmith didn't ask many questions, just gave me a receipt and told me to stay safe. Nice guy. But he looked at me a little too long, like maybe I was the problem. I didn't care. That night, I returned to the house. And I brought a friend. Ryan was an old co-worker from a job I'd had years ago. We'd stayed in touch, and I trusted him more than anyone else. He was practical, calm, and most importantly, believed me. We walked the whole house together, checking every door, every window, every closet. When we got to the hallway, I stopped in front of the closet. This is where I think something's wrong. Ryan opened it slowly. Just coats, old shoes, a box of wires. But I stared at the back wall. Something felt off. I leaned in and knocked. It sounded hollow. Ryan noticed too. Together, we pulled the coats out, moved the box. And that's when we saw it, a panel, not a door, not exactly. Just a thin rectangle of drywall, not quite flush with the rest. Barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. He looked at me. You want to open it? I didn't. but I nodded anyway. He used a screwdriver to pry the edge. It came away with a soft pop. Behind it, darkness. A crawl space, narrow, maybe 2 feet deep, running the length of the wall. Ryan shined his flashlight inside. And then we both stepped back at the same time. Inside were wrappers, empty water bottles, a blanket, a phone charger, and worst of all, a pair of socks. Mine. Ryan whispered, "Jesus Christ, man." I didn't speak, couldn't. Someone had been living inside my house. Not just breaking in, staying, watching. The thought made my skin crawl. I backed away from the opening, bile rising in my throat. We called the police right then. They showed up within 20 minutes, took photos, bagged the items. They said they'd review prints, though warned that if he wore gloves, there might not be much to go on. One officer, an older guy with a tight jaw, pulled me aside. "You said he was a friend? Someone you let into your house?" I nodded. He sighed. "That's how they get close. Make you feel like you're the one who's overreacting. But this guy, he crossed a line." "I want to press charges," I said. "If we can find him, you'll have your chance." He handed me a case number and promised to follow up. That was last night. Now I'm sitting on my couch again, staring at the hall closet. It's sealed, boarded, taped, locked. But I can still feel it, that presence, that watching. And when I check my phone, new notification. Motion detected. Timestamp, 3:12 a.m. This time the camera's facing the closet. And the footage? The panel shifts. Just a little. Just enough. After I watched the panel shift in the footage, just that half-inch tilt, like someone inside was pushing against it, I sat in the living room with every light on, my back to the front door and my eyes locked on the hallway. I held a crowbar in my lap. I don't know why I grabbed it instead of a bat or a kitchen knife. Maybe because it felt heavier, more permanent. I didn't call the cops right away. What would I even say? That I saw a board move? That I think someone is still in my house, maybe in the walls? I played the footage back again, slowed it down, frame by frame. At 3:11:47 a.m., the hallway was still. At 3:12:2, the panel lifted, maybe a few centimeters. A shadow shifted behind it. And by 3:12:15, it clicked back into place. No one came out. No one went in. And yet someone had moved it. Ryan called at 8 a.m., his voice groggy. "I couldn't sleep, man," he said. "That crawl space, I keep thinking about how small it is. You'd have to really want to be in there." "He was," I said. "I think he still is." Ryan paused. "You should get out." "I can't leave, not until I know." I couldn't explain it, not even to myself, but something in me refused to abandon the house. Maybe because the idea of leaving meant giving Craig power. Me fleeing my own life because he wouldn't stay out of it. That felt wrong, like surrendering. By noon, I'd made up my mind. I was going to open the panel myself. The police had bagged the stuff they found, taken their photos, and told me to seal it up for now, but they hadn't actually gone inside the crawl space. It wasn't technically large enough for an adult man to live in, they'd said. But then again, they hadn't seen the footage. I took the crowbar, a flashlight, and slid the panel off. The stale air hit me immediately dry, almost sour. I knelt down, shining the light inside. There was more space than I'd realized. The crawl space stretched farther than I thought. A narrow corridor that bent sharply to the left just 10 feet in. I couldn't see past the turn. "Jesus," I whispered. I sat back on my heels, debating my next move. Then I heard something. A scrape. Soft. Deliberate. From inside. I backed up fast, heart hammering. I wasn't going in. Not alone. Not without knowing he wasn't armed. I called the cops again. 2 officers came, both younger, both looking like they'd drawn the short straw. They brought a dog, a 9 unit that sniffed around the opening, ears perked. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, just whined. The handler frowned. That's not good. They slid on gloves and shined flashlights into the space. "I'm not crawling in there," one said. The other nodded. "We'll need to call in search and recovery, or someone from structural." The delay killed me. They marked the opening with tape, made notes, asked me the same questions again when I'd seen Craig last, what he said, what he wore. I repeated everything, word for word. But I could tell they weren't treating it like an emergency. To them, he was just a guy who overstayed his welcome, not a stalker, not a threat. That night, I went back to the motel. Not because I was scared, because I was tired, and because I needed to think. I didn't tell Ryan I left. I didn't tell the police either. But at around 2:50 a.m., I got a notification. Motion detected. I tapped the feed, dreading what I'd see. The hallway was empty. Then at 3:01 a.m., the panel slid open again. And this time Craig crawled out. Slowly, like he was stretching after a long nap. He stood up, brushed himself off, looked around, and then walked toward the kitchen. I fumbled to switch the feed to the other cam. He opened the fridge, drank straight from the orange juice carton, then shut it. He didn't touch anything else, just walked back to the hallway and disappeared through the panel again. I watched the whole thing unfold in real time. My breath caught in my throat. I was frozen, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, light from the phone casting long shadows against the wall. Craig was living in my house, coming out when he knew I was gone, making himself comfortable. He didn't want to steal anything. He wanted to belong. The next morning, I took the footage to the station myself. I didn't bother calling. I walked in and demanded to see Harland, the lead officer assigned to the case. They brought him out after 15 minutes. He watched the clip with furrowed brows, expression hardening with every passing second. "All right," he said, "we'll issue a warrant. We'll sweep the whole property. If he's still there, we'll find him." Finally. They came in full force that afternoon, 2 cruisers, 3 officers, and a detective. They went through the crawl space with gear, gloves, headlamps. They found him, huddled behind the bend in the wall, curled in on himself like a spider in its web. He didn't fight, didn't scream, didn't even try to run. Just said, "I thought he wanted me here." They cuffed him and walked him out the front door. As they passed me, Craig turned his head, smiled. Not big, not sinister, just calm, like he knew something I didn't, like I'd let him in. I stared at him and said nothing. He disappeared into the cruiser without a word. It's been 2 weeks. The house is quiet now. Still, I replaced the panel with actual drywall, painted over it, moved a cabinet in front of it just in case. I sleep again most nights. Sometimes I still hear sounds, a creak here, a soft thump there, but I tell myself it's just the house settling. And when I check the cameras, nothing. But every now and then, I walk past the closet and think I hear breathing. Just on the other side. You'd think that after someone's arrested for squatting in your crawl space, someone you once shared beers and jokes with, you'd sleep better. You'd assume that everything clicks back into place once they're out of the house, out of your life. That's not what happened. The first 2 nights after Craig's arrest, I barely moved from the couch. I'd doze off with the TV on, jerk awake at every commercial break, heart racing for no reason. The 3rd night, I forced myself into bed and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. He was gone. The crawl space was sealed. The police had taken everything: his blanket, water bottles, the charger, even a small notepad they found with nonsense scribbled in red pen. Pages full of loops, names, symbols, numbers that didn't mean anything. Still, the detective said they'd keep it as evidence, said it might show intent. But the feeling he left behind didn't disappear with him. It lingered. I kept catching myself glancing at shadows, jumping at the sound of the fridge kicking on. I'd come out of the bathroom and pause, listening, not for anything specific, just listening. And always, always, that damn hallway closet. It had been boarded up, painted over, and pushed behind a heavy cabinet. There was no way in anymore, but still, I felt its presence. Like if I walked past too slowly, I'd hear breathing. Or worse, I'd feel someone holding theirs, waiting for me to pass. I told Ryan all of this over lunch. "You've got trauma," he said, tapping the side of his head. "What he did living in there, watching you, it sticks." "I get that," I said, "but it's more than just nerves. It's like he didn't leave, like there's a version of him still in the house." "You mean like a ghost?" Ryan said, half laughing. I gave him a look. "I'm serious," I said. He didn't laugh after that. The following day, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name, typed on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typewritten, neat. "I'm sorry I used the closet. I didn't know you'd find it so soon." No name. I sat at the kitchen table holding that paper with both hands, trying to understand what I was reading. I hadn't told anyone where I moved the cabinet. No one knew I covered the panel. And the police still had Craig in custody. I called Detective Harland immediately. "Has he been released?" "No," he said. "He's still being evaluated." "Evaluated?" "Psych hold. He's not cooperating, barely talking. We're waiting on the psych team's report." "Why?" I read the letter out loud. Harland went quiet. "We'll send someone to pick it up," he said. That night, I barely made it through a shower without yanking the curtain back every 30 seconds. The light flickered once in the hallway, and I damn near tore the breaker box open, convinced someone was in the basement. But again, nothing. 3 nights later, I heard my name. Whispered. Not loud, not panicked, just whispered. I was lying in bed, the covers pulled up, barely asleep when I heard it. "Hey." Then again, a little louder. "Hey, man, wake up." I sat up straight. Silence. I grabbed my phone, checked the camera app. No alerts. I got out of bed, barefoot, and made my way to the hallway. The air felt colder than usual, like a window had been left open. I checked. All shut, all locked. Then from the kitchen a click, like the sound of a light switch being flipped, only no light came on. I moved toward it, slow. The switch by the pantry was already up. I flicked it down, up, nothing. I backed away, heart pounding, feeling the weight of the house press in. That's when I noticed the front door. It was unlocked. Not wide open, just unlocked. I always locked it, always. I turned it slowly, locked it again, and stood there for a long minute trying to breathe. In the morning, I installed a second lock on the front door. Then I bought a motion-activated camera for inside the hallway, pointed directly at the closet. Even if I didn't believe in ghosts, I needed to see that nothing was coming in or out. I turned to old habits, coffee at all hours, late-night TV on mute, lights always on. The camera gave me some comfort at first. Then, on a Wednesday morning, I found a new notification. Motion detected, hallway cam, 3:43 a.m. I sat down, opened the app, and played it. The timestamp appeared, then the hallway empty, silent, bathed in that dim yellow light from the fixture overhead. At 3:43 and 21 seconds, something shifted. The cabinet. Just a tremble, a soft shudder. It moved forward less than an inch like someone had pushed from behind. Then it stopped. That was it. No one entered frame. Nothing came out. But the cabinet had moved. I checked it myself an hour later, measured the gap between it and the wall, took photos, compared it to the night before. It had definitely moved. That afternoon, I visited Craig. Not by choice. Detective Harland called, said Craig had asked to speak with me. "He's lucid today," he said. "Might help you close this out." Close it out. I hated that phrase, like it was something you could pack into a box, tape up, and move on from. I met Harland at the facility, a beige building with security glass and a smell that clung to your clothes. Craig sat across the table from me, wearing scrubs, no restraints. His hands were folded neatly on the table. He looked calm. Healthier even. "Hey," he said, "like we just run into each other at the grocery store. Thanks for coming." I didn't reply. He looked down at the table. "I know you probably hate me." Silence. He sighed. I just didn't want to be alone. That's all. You were always kind, back in school, even when I was weird. You broke into my home, I said. I didn't take anything, he said quickly. I just wanted to be there. You ever feel like you don't exist unless someone's watching you? He said it like it made perfect sense. I knew your routine, he continued. I never meant to scare you. I leaned forward. Did you send the letter? He tilted his head. What letter? The one that said you were sorry, about the closet. His eyes shifted, just for a second. I've been in here, he said, haven't left. I stared at him. He smiled. Small, closed lip. That same expression from the hallway footage. You sure I'm the only one you let in? I left without another word. And that night, the hallway camera caught something new. A light flickering under the closet. Just for a second. A dim glow, then gone. Like a candle had been lit, then snuffed out. I didn't tell anyone about the candlelight. Not Ryan, not the cops, definitely not the detective who sat across from me while I tried to explain that something was still inside my house, something besides Craig. Because if it wasn't Craig and I was starting to believe it wasn't, then who the hell was it? Or worse, what? The next few nights were quiet in the literal sense. No motion alerts, no new sounds, no creaks or whispers or shuffling cabinet. But that was the problem. It was too quiet. I couldn't sleep in my room anymore. The hallway outside felt like it was holding its breath, like something waited just out of sight. I started camping out in the living room again, back on the couch where this whole thing began, the security feed always playing on a tablet next to me. The hallway camera stayed still, but I didn't trust stillness anymore. Stillness was waiting. Stillness was watching. I woke up around 4 in the morning on Friday, sweating. Not from a dream. I don't even think I was sleeping. My shirt was soaked. The kind of sweat that comes from dread, not heat. I sat up, rubbed my face, and glanced toward the kitchen. The hallway light was off. I never turned off the hallway light. I stood slowly, every hair on my arm standing up. My foot hit the floor too hard and made a dull thud that echoed more than it should have in a house that small. I looked down the hall. Darkness. I checked the camera feed on the tablet. Black screen. No signal. That was impossible. The camera was hardwired into the wall. I took a breath, held it, and walked toward the hall like someone stepping into water. Each step creaked. I reached for the light switch. Flipped it. Nothing. I backed up, slowly, one foot behind the other. And then something tapped from inside the wall. Once. Then silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I ripped the cabinet away from the wall. It hadn't moved, still flush against the baseboard, still blocking what used to be the crawlspace entrance. The drywall patch I installed, still intact, but when I knocked on it gently, like someone approaching a wild animal, it sounded hollow again. Worse than before. I grabbed the claw end of the hammer and started chipping at the edges, pulling the drywall off in small pieces. And beneath it, The panel, not the one I had installed, not the one the police had sealed. The original, like the wall had never been touched. I stumbled back, heart racing. This wasn't just paranoia. Something was undoing what I'd fixed. Something was maintaining the access. I called Ryan. He didn't pick up. I left a message that probably sounded half delirious, then drove to his place, pounding on the door until he opened it in a hoodie and jeans, blinking like he'd just woken up. "Jesus, man," he said, "you look like hell." "Come over," I said, "right now." He didn't ask questions, just grabbed his keys and followed me back. When we got inside, I showed him the wall. "How?" he whispered. "I don't know." "You sealed this. I watched you." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, then stepped forward and knocked. 3 sharp taps. Something knocked back. Not loud, not fast. Just enough. He jumped. "Okay," he said, backing up. "You need to leave this house. Not until I know what's in there. You're not thinking clearly. This isn't just Craig. This is, I don't even know." We stood there, breathing heavy, staring at the wall like it might open on its own. Ryan turned toward me. "If you open that panel, you better be ready to find something you can't put back." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat across from the hallway, crowbar in hand. At 2:57 a.m., the hallway light flicked on by itself. No click, no hum, just on. 3 minutes later, the panel slid open. Slowly, smoothly. No one came out, but the air changed. It felt thicker, harder to breathe. I stood, camera in one hand, flashlight in the other. I stepped closer, shined the light inside. The crawl space looked deeper than it had before. Longer, wider, like it had grown. I stepped back. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Childlike. Whispering. "I don't like it in here." I froze. It wasn't Craig. It wasn't anyone I knew. It was a girl. I turned and ran to my phone, dialing Harlan directly. Voicemail. I didn't leave one. I called Ryan. Straight to voicemail. I stood in my living room, shaking, unsure if I was still awake. Then I heard the voice again. Closer. "Why did you stop looking?" The police arrived at 7:00 a.m. They found me in the hallway, sitting against the wall, the panel wide open beside me. I hadn't moved in hours. I told them everything. Again, the voices, the wall changing, the panel reappearing. They said it was stress, sleep deprivation. They told me Craig's evaluation had come back. He wasn't considered a threat. He was being released under supervision. I laughed when they said that. I asked them to look in the crawl space again. They did. And this time, they found something. A small red hair bow, tangled in the insulation. It didn't belong to me. It didn't belong to Craig. It was old, faded, and when they took it in, they ran it against a local missing persons database. They matched it to a girl named Lily Kearns, reported missing in 2002, 12 years old. Last seen at this address. Before I ever moved in, before Craig ever squatted in the walls, before I ever met him. And just like that, the story changed. This wasn't Craig's obsession. This was someone else's house. And I had walked into it, uninvited. The day they confirmed the bow belonged to Lily Kearns was the day the house finally made sense. Or maybe not sense, maybe just context. You don't live in a place like that and come out of it feeling sane. But at least now I knew I hadn't been imagining everything. The crawl space, the voice, the feeling of being watched from within my own walls. There was a history here, and I had stepped into it blindly. They reopened her case. Turns out Lily Kearns had gone missing from this very house over 20 years ago. She'd been in foster care placed with a couple who'd vanished shortly after she did. No one had connected the house back then, not after it was flipped and sold a few years later. No one remembered, or maybe no one wanted to. The bow was enough to shake things loose. They sent a cadaver dog into the crawl space the next week. And that's when they found her. Not just her remains, but the toys, the blanket, a name carved into the wood. Lily, etched by a child's hand into the back wall. They never found the foster parents. And as for Craig, he hadn't known about her. When they showed him the pictures, the carving, the bow, he broke down. They said he wept like a child, said he never saw her, never heard her, said he only chose that crawl space because it felt safe, familiar, like someone was protecting him. Harlan told me that part. I didn't respond. The house sat empty for 2 weeks. I stayed with Ryan, sleeping on his couch, drifting between exhaustion and something worse. Not quite paranoia, more like residual dread. Like even though the danger had passed, my body hadn't gotten the memo. The closet stayed boarded, the cabinet untouched, but I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, the one that whispered to me, "Why did you stop looking?" I hadn't told anyone about that, not even Ryan, because part of me knew it wasn't something I could explain. It wasn't just a memory or a hallucination or a leftover echo from trauma. It was real. She was real. A girl who had been trapped, forgotten, hidden so deeply that even when someone lived right above her, they didn't know she was there. And somehow, I think she forgave me. Or maybe she just wanted me to finish it. I went back to the house the following weekend. Alone. Ryan offered to come with me, but I needed to face it without a buffer. I needed to look it in the eye and prove it didn't control me anymore. The locks had been changed. Again, standard procedure. There were still police markers on the doorframe, warning tape on the crawl space wall, but no one was watching anymore. I walked the house in silence. Kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, all untouched. Then the hallway. The panel was still open. I sat down in front of it, legs crossed like I was waiting for a confession. There was nothing inside now. No drafts, no breathing. Just stillness. But it felt different. Less like waiting, more like resting. I pulled out a small box I'd brought with me. Inside was a new hair bow, not an exact replica, but close, red velvet. Neat little knot. I'd found it at a second-hand shop and knew it had to come here. I crawled inside, just far enough to reach the corner. And I left it there. No cameras, no photos. Just a gesture, an acknowledgement. You were here, you mattered. I backed out slowly and sealed the panel myself, with screws this time, then covered it with drywall, sanded it, painted over it. No more access, no more hiding places. 2 months later, I sold the house. Didn't make a profit, didn't care. The buyers were a retired couple, sweet people. They didn't ask many questions. The real estate agent kept it light, focused on the updated appliances and big backyard. No one mentioned Lily, and I didn't offer. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because it wasn't mine to share anymore. She was found. That part was over. I moved to a small apartment near the edge of town. Nothing special, just a clean, quiet space with no crawl spaces, no closets near the hallway, and no drafty walls. It took me a while to sleep without checking the cameras every hour. Took even longer to shower without leaving the bathroom door open. But time passed, and the tension eased. Craig was transferred to a long-term facility. He writes me letters sometimes once a month, always the same tone, friendly, measured. He signs them "your friend," like nothing ever really went wrong. I never write back. I don't hate him, but I don't want him in my life. Some people are shadows, even when they're standing in the light. One morning, I got a call from Detective Harland. He was brief, as always. They finished the crawl space inspection, he said. Turns out it was a retrofit, part of an old bomb shelter built in the 60s. Must have been hidden for decades. Explains the size, I said. Explains how she went unnoticed, too, he added. Hell of a thing. We didn't talk much after that. I think he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. So I thanked him and hung up. It's been almost a year now. I still think about her. Not Craig, not the house. Her. Lily. Sometimes I wonder what she saw in those final moments, what she thought about, whether she believed anyone would come for her. And sometimes I think about that voice in the night. Why did you stop looking? And I say quietly, when no one else is around, I didn't. I found you. That's what matters in the end. Not how it started, not even how it ended, but that the silence was broken, that someone listened, that someone cared. She's not in the walls anymore. She's free, and so am I. I never thought I would end up in a place like that, not really. Old abandoned spaces always look more exciting in photos than they feel when you are actually standing there. In pictures, the paint peeling from a wall can look like art. Rusted metal can feel cinematic, but in person, it just smells like damp wood, oil, and something sour you cannot quite name. That carnival had been closed for years. Everyone in town knew that. But when my friends suggested we go out there one Saturday night, I went along. I do not know if it was curiosity or the need to prove I was not a coward, but I agreed. The entrance was nothing more than a chain-link gate with a crooked sign that used to read "Welcome," though most of the letters had rusted away or fallen off. A heavy padlock hung from the chain, but the fence beside it sagged so low that people had clearly climbed over before. The four of us went one at a time, trying not to catch our jeans on the metal, and for a moment on the other side, I felt like I had crossed into somewhere I was not meant to be. The air seemed different. Heavier. The grass was overgrown, stretching up past my knees, and every step was followed by the dry sound of something crunching beneath. The carnival ride stood like skeletons. The Ferris wheel loomed in the distance, unmoving. Its paint faded to a sickly gray. Food stalls slumped against each other. The wood warped from years of rain. The air smelled faintly of rust, and there was something else mixed in, like the faint sweet tang of burnt sugar. I thought I imagined it at first, because the place had been closed for so long that no food could possibly be left behind. But the smell lingered, subtle but there, as though the whole place remembered what it once was. We wandered toward the center, flashlights sweeping across broken signs and rotting benches. Someone had tagged the walls with spray paint, crude faces and words, but most of it was so faded that it was barely legible. My friend joked about setting up camp there, and another laughed too loud, the sound echoing strangely through the empty space. That was when we heard it. At first I thought it was one of them trying to spook me, because that was the sort of thing they would do. But as soon as the sound drifted across the air, all four of us froze. It was the sound of a child laughing. Not just any laugh either. It was high and sharp, full of the kind of joy that only children manage when they are playing. It rang out from somewhere near the rides, faint but clear enough to know exactly what it was. I remember the way my chest tightened, my flashlight shaking as I tried to find where it had come from. My friends went quiet too, their faces pale, though one of them forced out a laugh and said it was probably an echo or an animal. We stood there too long, straining our ears. I wanted to believe him, wanted to tell myself it was nothing, but there was no mistaking the rhythm of that sound. The way it bubbled up and trailed off, the way it carried on the still night air. It was a laugh, and it came from a child. I suggested we leave. My voice cracked when I said it, and I could feel my palms sweating around the flashlight handle, but of course none of them wanted to go. They teased me, told me I was jumping at shadows, that it was probably some other group messing around nearby. I hated the idea, but I let myself be pulled further in. The path wound between the game booths, where old prizes still dangled behind shattered glass, faded stuffed animals with their eyes missing, once bright balloons now shriveled and crumpled. Everything looked like it had been frozen mid-scene and then left to rot. My stomach churned the further we went, but I kept my mouth shut. When we reached the carousel, I felt something shift in the air. The horses stood in a frozen circle, their paint cracked, their eyes staring blankly forward. Cobwebs stretched across the poles, and the platform sagged under the weight of neglect. We walked around it, our flashlights bouncing over the chipped colors, when the sound came again. Not laughter this time. Music. Faint and tinny, like it was coming from a long broken speaker. The carousel began to turn. Slowly at first, then with more certainty, the platform rotated. The horses bobbed up and down in jerky movements, as if their stiff joints were grinding back to life. The music stuttered in the air, the kind of cheerful carnival tune that would have once been inviting but now made my stomach twist. We froze, all of us, our mouths open, the beams of our flashlights catching on the gleam of the poles as they moved. I could feel my heart in my throat, my chest heaving like I had run miles. No one spoke. The air seemed to hum with the weight of what we were seeing. One of my friends finally whispered that it had to be the wind, or maybe some leftover power source still connected. His voice sounded hollow even as he said it, and none of us believed him. The ride turned one full circle, the music warbling, then slowed to a stop. Silence rushed back in like a wave. We backed away from it slowly, our feet crunching over broken glass and weeds. My flashlight beam swept the ground, and that was when I saw it. A small shoe lying in the grass, just a few feet from where I stood. It was the kind of shoe a kid might wear to school. Worn canvas with fraying laces, the sole scuffed from running. I crouched down, my hand shaking as I reached out to touch it. The fabric was warm. Not from the air, not from the sun, because it was well after midnight and the whole place was damp with cold. It was warm in a way that made my skin crawl, like it had just been pulled off a child's foot. I dropped it and stumbled back, my throat tight. My friends were pale now too, their joking gone. For the first time I could see real fear in their faces. We did not speak. We just turned and made our way back to the fence, our flashlights shaking, our feet moving faster than we intended. I kept glancing behind me, convinced I would see someone small and barefoot following us through the grass, but there was nothing. Only the silence, broken by the faint echo of that laughter, still ringing in my ears. I did not sleep that night. None of us did. After leaving the carnival, we sat in the car in silence for what felt like forever, the engine idling, headlights cutting into the empty road. Nobody wanted to be the first to say what we had just experienced. When one of my friends finally spoke, it was only to mutter something about how we must have been imagining it, that adrenaline could play tricks on the senses. He sounded like he wanted to convince himself more than anyone else. No one else argued. We just let the words hang in the air and drove home without another word. When I finally stumbled through my front door, the clock on the stove glowed past 3. My clothes reeked of damp grass and dust. My shoes were caked with mud, and the sound of that carousel music was still stuck in my head. I lay on the couch fully dressed, my dog curling at my feet, and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shoe. It was such a small thing, and yet it felt heavier than anything else I had ever touched. The next morning, I decided I needed answers. I started with a simple search about the carnival. Most of what I found was the kind of nostalgia you expect. Old photos from when it was still running, families smiling, kids holding cotton candy, rides lit up against the night. But buried deeper, I found something else. Local news clippings from more than 20 years ago. Words like missing, closed indefinitely, safety concerns. My stomach twisted as I read. Several children had disappeared from the carnival in its final season. The articles were vague, the way they always are when reporters do not want to fan hysteria. But the facts were there. Kids had gone in and never come out. Parents had reported them missing after a night of rides and games, and though the police had searched, no trace was ever found. The carnival had closed shortly after, citing financial strain, but every line between the words screamed cover-up. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the morning light slanting across the screen, and felt cold. That laughter we heard was not funny anymore, not even eerie. It was horrifying, because now I knew there had been children, and they had never left. I told myself not to say anything to my friends. They would just laugh or roll their eyes, accuse me of feeding into urban legends. But the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to tell someone, anyone, just so I was not carrying it alone. Later that day, I tried bringing it up casually with one of them. I mentioned the articles, the missing kids, the closure. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. That's just small-town gossip. They probably ran away, or their parents made it up. You really think laughter in the dark means ghosts? He laughed, but it sounded hollow. I could see it in his face that he was not as sure as he wanted to be. That night I could not settle. I kept pacing the apartment, checking the windows, locking the door twice. Every time I looked outside, the world seemed too still, like the quiet after a storm when you are waiting for the next crash of thunder. Around midnight, I gave in and poured myself a drink, thinking it might calm my nerves. It barely touched the tightness in my chest. I tried to sleep again, but sometime after 2 I woke up to a sound that made my blood run cold. My phone buzzed on the nightstand with a notification. A new video had been posted in a local history group I followed. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. It was footage from the carnival's opening decades ago. Kids laughing, running past the camera with balloons. The carousel spinning, its music bright and cheerful. And then, right at the edge of the frame, a small figure stood watching. A child, barefoot, staring directly into the lens. His face was pale, expression unreadable, but his eyes were wide and fixed. Nobody else in the video seemed to notice him. The camera panned away, and he vanished from view. I slammed the phone face down on the table and sat frozen, heart hammering. It could have been anything, just a kid playing in the crowd. But the way he looked at the camera, the way his body seemed stiff, unnatural, it hit me in the gut. I told myself to stop digging, to let it go. But the problem with curiosity is that it does not stop once you have had a taste. I spent the next day calling around, trying to find anyone who might know more. Most people brushed me off, said the carnival was ancient history, not worth thinking about. But one older neighbor, a woman who had lived in the area her whole life, lowered her voice when I asked. "They never told the truth about that place," she whispered, her eyes darting around as though someone might overhear. Kids went missing. Everyone knew it. My cousin's friend was one of them. Just vanished during the fireworks one night. The carnival closed the next week, but no bodies were ever found. I asked if she thought the place was haunted, if she believed the stories about laughter in the dark. She gave me a sharp look. "Haunted or not, something wrong is still there. You do not go near it, not if you know what is good for you." I walked away with my stomach in knots. Her words replayed in my head all night. Not haunted, something wrong. The distinction chilled me more than if she had simply blamed ghosts. That weekend, I drove past the carnival again. I told myself I was just passing by, that I would not stop. The sun was low, the sky stained orange, and the Ferris wheel loomed over the trees like a skeleton reaching for the clouds. I slowed the car without meaning to, my eyes drawn to the rusting gates. And then I saw it. A figure standing near the entrance. Small, barefoot. It was too far away to see clearly, but every nerve in my body told me it was a child. He stood motionless, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly as though listening. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, forcing myself not to stop. I pressed the gas and drove past, heart pounding, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. By the time I got home, I was shaking so badly I had to sit in the driveway for 10 minutes before I could move. My dog barked when I finally walked in, like he sensed something clinging to me. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing, just another trick of the light, another product of an overactive imagination. But the image of that figure stayed with me, burned into my vision. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, I kept hearing the faint strains of carousel music in my head. Not loud, not real, just enough to keep me from slipping into sleep. And underneath it, soft as a memory, I swore I could hear laughter. For the next few days, I could not stop thinking about what I had seen by the gate. I told myself I had imagined it, that it was just a kid from town messing around, but the image stayed burned into my mind. The way the figure had stood so still, head tilted like it was listening for something, made my skin crawl every time I replayed it in my head. The more I tried to push it away, the more it pulled me back. I thought maybe if I went back in daylight it would lose its power over me. The place could not be that frightening under the sun, with the weeds glowing in the light and the rust showing its true colors. So one afternoon, when the air was heavy with the smell of rain and the streets were nearly empty, I drove out there again. The fence looked smaller than I remembered, the sign still clinging to its rusted hooks. I parked a little ways down the road so it would not look like I was trespassing if someone drove by. My chest tightened as I walked up, weeds brushing against my jeans, the air thick and humid. I told myself I was just going to stand by the fence, maybe snap a few pictures, and leave. When I reached the gate, the silence pressed in. No cars, no birds, not even the buzz of insects. Just stillness. I leaned against the fence and looked in. The carousel stood in the distance, frozen again, the horses caught mid-step. I expected it to look ordinary in the light, but something about it felt worse. The chipped paint looked like flayed skin, the horses' empty eyes glaring as if they had been waiting. I pulled my phone out, meaning to take a picture, and that was when I saw it. In the weeds by my feet, half buried under grass, was another shoe, small, canvas, the same style as the one I had found that night, but this one was darker, as if the fabric had been stained. I crouched, hesitating before picking it up. The canvas was soft, frayed at the edges, but what made me drop it immediately was the warmth. Again, just like the first one. Too warm to have been sitting in the damp grass for decades. I stood there shaking, staring at it, my breath coming fast. My phone slipped from my hand into the weeds. As I bent to pick it up, I caught sight of movement out of the corner of my eye. Just for a second. A flicker of something darting between the game stalls deeper inside. My whole body tensed, and I stumbled backward until my shoulders hit the fence. I told myself to leave, to get in my car and drive far away, but my legs would not move. I stared into the carnival grounds, my heart hammering, waiting for whatever I had seen to appear again. Nothing came. The weeds shifted once, then stilled. Finally, I forced myself to move, practically jogging back to the car. I locked the doors and sat gripping the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale and sick, eyes wide like a trapped animal. I hated what I had become in just a few days, this nervous wreck jumping at shadows. But I knew what I had seen, and worse, I knew what I had felt when I touched that shoe. Back home, I tried to bury myself in normal life. Work, chores, scrolling on my phone, anything to keep my mind busy. But it did not help. I kept hearing that laughter echoing in my head, bright and sharp, the way it had carried through the empty carnival. A few nights later, I woke up to a sound that made my skin crawl. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable. Carousel music. Not from a speaker, not from my phone, just soft, tinny notes drifting through the night air. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, straining to hear. The tune faltered, warbled, then faded. My dog barked once, sharp and terrified, before scrambling under the bed. I sat frozen, my body ice cold, until silence settled again. I did not sleep after that. At dawn, I made coffee with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. My head felt heavy, fogged, but beneath it was the undeniable sense that something had followed me home. The next day, I decided I had to know more. I drove to the library and asked for the old newspaper archives. The librarian gave me a curious look but showed me how to access the microfilm. Hours blurred together as I scrolled through faded pages, scanning headlines. Most of it was about town fairs, local parades, charity events. But eventually, I found what I was looking for. Several missing children, all around the same age, had vanished within a span of weeks. Each case was eerily similar. Last seen playing near the rides. Parents reported hearing strange music when they were looking for them. Police had combed the grounds but found nothing. The carnival owner had issued a statement about unfortunate coincidences before closing for good. One article made my stomach clench. A quote from a mother whose son had disappeared. She said that on the night he went missing, she heard him laughing, clear as day, even though she could not see him anywhere. It was his laugh, she said. I would know it anywhere, but it came from all around me, like the air itself was carrying it. Just away. I left the library with my chest tight, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I wanted to believe it was all coincidence, that my mind was weaving the past and present together into something more sinister than it really was. But then, I remembered the warmth of that shoe in the grass, the faint music outside my bedroom window. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. At some point I must have dozed, because I woke to the sound of something tapping lightly against my window. My heart jumped into my throat as I turned my head. Nothing was there, just the faint outline of branches in the dark. But when I looked back at the foot of the bed, my breath caught. A Polaroid lay on the blanket. I did not own a Polaroid camera. The picture was grainy, washed out, but the image was unmistakable. It was me, standing by the carnival gate in broad daylight, holding my phone. I had never seen anyone else there that day. I sat frozen, staring at that Polaroid like it might burn through my hands. My first thought was that someone was playing a trick, that maybe one of my friends had followed me that day and snapped the photo to scare me. But even as the thought formed, I knew it did not add up. None of them had been there. I had parked far down the road, crept up to the fence in silence, barely stayed longer than a few minutes. If someone had been close enough to take a picture, I would have seen them. My dog whined at the foot of the bed, pawing at the blanket like he wanted to bury himself. I shoved the photo into my nightstand drawer, shut it tight, and sat there listening to my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Sleep was out of the question. I turned on every light in the apartment and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the window. The next morning I pulled the picture out again, hoping daylight would make it less terrifying. It did not. If anything, I noticed more. In the background behind me, just at the edge of the frame, a small figure stood by the gate. It was blurry, almost blending with the weeds, but the size was unmistakable. A child, arms hanging loose, head tilted the same way I had seen before. I shoved the photo back into the drawer, locked it, and tried to tell myself I was imagining the figure. A trick of the grass, maybe a shadow, but the unease sat like a stone in my gut. I could not shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been standing there watching me. The following days blurred together in a fog of exhaustion. Every night I lay awake listening for faint music, laughter, or footsteps. Some nights were silent, but the silence felt weighted, like the moment before thunder. Other nights I swore I heard faint tapping at the windows, the sound of tiny hands brushing against glass. My dog refused to sleep in my room anymore. He curled up by the front door instead, as though guarding against something outside. On the 5th night after the Polaroid appeared, I woke suddenly around 3 in the morning. My mouth was dry, my heart racing before I even knew why. I sat up, straining to listen, and then I heard it. Laughter. Not outside, not in the distance. Inside. It was faint, muffled, drifting through the vents like the air itself was carrying it. My whole body went rigid. I gripped the bat I had taken to keeping by the bed, but the sound had already stopped. Only silence pressed in again, heavier than before. I did not sleep after that. I stayed on the couch until dawn, all the lights burning, my eyes fixed on the dark hallway. When morning came, I walked into the kitchen for coffee and froze. On the table, where I had left nothing, lay another Polaroid. This one showed my living room, my couch, me asleep on it. I dropped the photo and stumbled back, my chest tight. My apartment door was locked, windows shut. No one could have gotten in, and yet someone had. I could not take it anymore. I drove straight to the police station, the photo shaking in my hand. The officer behind the desk took one look, frowned, and asked where I had gotten it. When I explained, he looked at me like I was crazy. They filed a report, but I could tell by the tone of his voice they thought I had staged it myself. I left the station humiliated and more terrified than ever. If no one believed me, then I was on my own. That night I pushed my dresser in front of the bedroom door, locked every window, and sat awake with the bat across my lap. Hours crawled by, my eyes grew heavy, but I forced them open again and again. Sometime past 2, I must have drifted, because the next thing I knew, a faint noise pulled me awake. The sound of paper sliding against wood, my nightstand drawer. I stared at it, my throat dry, too scared to move. Slowly, the drawer creaked open an inch, then another. Inside, The Polaroid I had locked away shifted to the top, as though invisible hands were sliding it forward. My chest heaved. I jumped up, grabbed the drawer, and slammed it shut. The bang echoed through the room. For a long moment I stood there trembling, listening to the silence. Then, faintly, I heard laughter again, this time closer. The next morning, I packed a bag. I told myself I would stay with a friend for a while, get away from the apartment, clear my head. I did not tell them why. I could barely explain it to myself, but I knew I could not stay there. But as I zipped my bag and turned toward the door, something caught my eye. On the floor by the couch, half hidden under the blanket, lay another small shoe. The same size, the same canvas fabric, this one even dirtier than the last. I stared at it until my vision blurred, every hair on my body standing on end. I did not take the shoe. I did not even touch it. I left the bag on the couch, grabbed my keys, and fled the apartment without looking back. I drove aimlessly for hours, too wired to think, until I ended up back near the carnival. The gate loomed ahead, the rusted sign swaying slightly in the breeze. I pulled over without meaning to, sitting in the car with my hands shaking on the wheel. And then, just as the sun dipped low, I saw it again. The figure of a child standing by the gate, this time closer than before. I could see more detail now. Small bare feet, legs pale against the weeds, head tilted to one side as though listening. He did not move, did not wave. Just stared at me with an expression I could not read. I floored the gas and sped away, my heart slamming against my ribs. That night, back at my friend's house, I lay awake on the couch. I told myself I was safe, that it was just an image burned into my mind. But around 3 a.m, the faint sound of carousel music drifted through the window. My skin went cold. I sat up, straining to listen, and then froze. Another Polaroid lay on the coffee table in front of me. This one showed my car, parked by the carnival gate, and the child standing right outside my window, his face pressed to the glass. I did not want to touch that Polaroid on the coffee table. Just looking at it made my skin crawl. The way the child's face was pressed against the car window, the blurred suggestion of wide eyes and a faint grin, it was too much. I sat on the couch staring at it until the sun came up, hoping that daylight would wash it away, that somehow it would not be there when I blinked again. But when the light finally filtered through the blinds, the picture was still there. The image burned into my sight. My friend asked me later if I had not slept, and I lied. I said the couch was uncomfortable. I said I was restless. I did not tell him that I had been sitting awake with every muscle tensed, listening for the faint sound of laughter drifting through the vents. I did not want to bring him into this. Whatever it was, it seemed fixated on me, and I could not stand the thought of dragging anyone else into it. Still, as the day wore on, I could not escape the feeling that I was being watched. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder while brushing my teeth, checking the corners of rooms, pulling the curtains tight. At one point, when I stepped outside to let the dog into the yard, I thought I saw someone standing across the street. Just a small figure in the shadows of a tree. By the time I focused, it was gone. The dog barked all afternoon, pacing near the windows, growling low at nothing I could see. Every time he growled, my stomach tightened. Animals do not imagine things. They react to what is there. I found myself apologizing to him under my breath, telling him I was sorry for bringing this into his life. That night, I forced myself to stay awake. I made coffee, paced the living room, scrolled through my phone until my eyes burned. Around 2:30, the house went quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your eardrums. The dog whimpered and ducked under the table. My heart slammed into my ribs as I heard the faintest sound of music. Carousel music. Not from outside, not drifting from the carnival. It was right there, in the house, soft and tinny like it was playing on an old toy. I gripped the bat I had brought with me, inching down the hallway, every step deliberate. The music faltered once, warbled, then carried on. I followed it to the kitchen, and that was when I saw it. Another Polaroid sitting on the counter. My hands shook as I picked it up. The picture showed me standing in that exact hallway, bat in hand, looking terrified. The photo had been taken seconds earlier. I dropped it, stumbling backward, bile rising in my throat. My chest heaved as the music stopped abruptly, the silence ringing in my ears. I ran back to the couch, pulled the dog close, and sat there until dawn, heart hammering, not daring to close my eyes. By the next morning, I was unraveling. My friend asked again if something was wrong, and I snapped at him, telling him to mind his own business. He looked hurt, but I did not have the energy to explain. How could I? How could I tell him that something impossible had followed me home, that it was leaving snapshots of my fear scattered around like trophies? I tried leaving town that day. I thought maybe distance would break whatever hold this thing had. I packed a small bag, loaded the dog into the car, and just drove. Highways blurred together, the sun sinking low behind me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt almost free. Then I stopped for gas at a lonely station miles from anywhere. I filled the tank, walked inside to grab a drink, and when I came back, there was something on the driver's seat, another Polaroid. This one showed me walking into the gas station. I nearly collapsed right there on the pavement. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel as I pulled back onto the road. My head spun with the realization that no matter how far I drove, it was not enough. I could not outrun this. By the time I checked into another cheap motel, I was barely functioning. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the knob, pulled the curtains tight, and sat on the bed with the dog curled at my side. My whole body was buzzing, every nerve on edge. I told myself I would just rest my eyes for a moment. I woke to the sound of laughter. It was not faint this time. It was sharp, close, echoing off the walls of the motel room. My eyes flew open, and for a split second I swore I saw movement near the bathroom door. Small, pale, the outline of a child. When I blinked, it was gone. On the nightstand, another Polaroid waited. This one was worse than the others. It showed me asleep on the bed, the dog curled beside me, but standing in the corner, clear as day, was the child. Small frame, bare feet, head tilted, watching me with that same expressionless stare. My stomach turned to stone. I sat there shaking, clutching the photo, trying to convince myself it was fake, that I was losing my mind. But the details were too sharp, too specific. My clothes, my posture, the position of the dog, all of it matched perfectly. I did not sleep again. I sat awake until dawn, every muscle locked, eyes burning. When the first light touched the curtains, I packed the bag and fled the motel. I did not know where I was going anymore. I only knew I could not stop moving. Driving aimlessly, I realized something that chilled me deeper than anything else. The Polaroids were not random. They were closer each time. At the carnival gate, at my car window, inside my living room, inside my friend's house, inside my motel room. It was not just following me, it was closing in. By the time I pulled back into town, I was shaking so badly I could barely turn the wheel. I parked in front of my apartment, staring up at the dark windows, knowing I could not go back inside. But I also knew I could not keep running forever. I sat there for hours, gripping the wheel, trying to decide what to do. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I opened the car door and stepped out, my legs weak beneath me. I do not know what I expected. Maybe silence, maybe relief. Instead, I found another Polaroid taped to my front door. This one made my stomach drop. It was me, standing in the car, hands gripping the wheel, staring up at my own apartment, taken from the outside, taken from just a few feet away. I stood there staring at the Polaroid taped to my door, my whole body numb. The photo showed me sitting in the car I had just stepped out of, staring at the very door where the picture now hung. It was impossible. The timing alone was impossible, but there it was, taped neatly at eye level, like someone wanted me to see it before I even set foot inside. My first thought was that I had to get out of there. My second thought was that there was no point. The pictures had followed me everywhere. The motel, the gas station, even my friend's house. Wherever I went, it found me. Running would not change anything. I peeled the photo from the door with shaking hands. Up close, I noticed something I had not before. The frame of the picture was smeared with faint red crayon lines. Just a few strokes, like a child had drawn on it in a hurry. I dropped it immediately, bile rising in my throat. Inside the apartment, the air felt heavy, stale. My dog refused to cross the threshold, whining and backing up until I gave up trying to coax him in. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, the silence pressing down. Every room felt wrong. The shadows stretched too far. The corners seemed deeper than they should. I turned on every light, but the brightness only made the emptiness worse. It was like the place was hollowed out, waiting for something to step inside. I sat on the couch and tried to breathe, my bat across my lap. My head ached from lack of sleep, my chest tight from days of fear. I told myself I had to face this. If I kept running, it would just keep following. If I stayed, maybe I could understand what it wanted. Hours passed like that. Nothing happened. The clock crept past 2, then closer to 3. My eyelids grew heavy, my grip on the bat loosening. Just as I started to drift, a faint sound pulled me back. Carousel music, tinny, broken, drifting through the apartment like it was playing from the walls themselves. My heart lurched. I stood, gripping the bat, every muscle trembling. The music grew louder, circling the room, echoing from every corner. I shouted into the empty space, my voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" The music stopped. Silence pressed in, and then, soft and clear, a child's laugh floated from the hallway. I turned slowly, my throat dry. At the far end of the hall, just by the bedroom door, stood the figure, small, pale, barefoot, head tilted, arms loose at its sides. For the first time I could see its face. It was not monstrous. That was almost worse. It was just a child, thin, eyes too dark, lips pressed in a straight line, expressionless, like it had been waiting a long time for me to finally look. I froze, my grip on the bat slick with sweat. The child did not move. It just stared, the silence stretching until my chest ached from holding my breath. And then, slowly, it raised one hand. In its fingers was another Polaroid. I did not want to see it. I did not want to know. But I could not look away. It held the picture out, tilting its head further, and let it flutter to the ground. My legs shook as I forced myself forward, each step heavier than the last. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, the walls closing in. When I finally reached the photo, I bent to pick it up, my vision tunneling. The picture showed me lying in my bed, not asleep, not alive, just still, eyes closed, arms folded, as though I had been laid out. And at the foot of the bed, the child stood smiling, wide and unnatural, teeth too sharp for its face. My stomach lurched. I dropped the photo, stumbling back. When I looked up, the hallway was empty. The child was gone. The silence rushed in again, thicker than before. I ran through every room, flicking on lights, checking closets, even pulling open the shower curtain with my bat raised. Nothing. Not a sound, not a shadow. Just emptiness. Eventually I collapsed on the couch, shaking, the bat clattering to the floor. I do not know how long I sat there, staring at the wall, waiting for something else to happen. Hours passed. The sun rose, filling the room with light, and still nothing came. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe showing me that final picture had been the point, some sick warning of what it wanted. I left the apartment that morning and never went back. I could not. I stayed with friends for a while, then moved across the state. I got a new place, a small apartment with thin walls and loud neighbors, the kind of place where silence does not exist. I thought maybe the noise would keep me safe, drown out whatever had followed me. For a while it worked. No laughter, no music, no Polaroids. I started to feel human again. But then, a few weeks ago, I found something slipped under my door. Not a photo this time, a crayon drawing. It showed me sitting on my couch, head in my hands, looking tired, and behind me, standing just at the edge of the paper, was a small figure, pale, barefoot, head tilted. I keep it in a drawer I cannot bring myself to open again. Some nights I sit awake listening, straining for carousel music or faint laughter, wondering if this is the night it decides to step back into view. I do not know what it wants. I do not know why it chose me. All I know is that I am tired, and that it is still out there. So, this happened last fall. I wasn't planning to write about it honestly. I thought maybe talking about it would just make it feel more real, and I wasn't sure I wanted that. But it's been months, and I still think about it almost every day. Not the whole trip, just certain moments. Anyway, we stayed at this place up north, in Maine, a little lake town that mostly shuts down after Labor Day. Everything about it was kind of perfect at first. The kind of thing you daydream about when you're stuck in traffic or scrolling through Zillow listings you'll never afford. The trees were already starting to turn, the lake was glassy and still, and the house itself was way nicer than I expected for the price. It was an old farmhouse that had been renovated into a rental. White siding, green shutters, big front porch with a swing. No neighbors in sight, just trees and water. When we got there, it felt like the middle of nowhere in a good way. The listing said rustic, but the inside was cozy and modern in that Pinterest barn chic way. Mismatched mugs, a wood stove that probably hadn't worked in a decade, big old mirrors and exposed beams. It even had one of those antique coat racks in the foyer. My daughter thought it looked like something from a haunted mansion, which, in hindsight, yeah. We were only supposed to be there for 5 days, just a little family getaway before school picked up again. Me, my wife Erin, and our daughter Nora, who had just turned 9. She'd been begging for a vacation with real nature, and this place definitely fit the bill. The first day was uneventful in the best possible way. We unpacked, made sandwiches, explored the yard, and let Nora drag us down to the water's edge. She spent a solid hour trying to skip rocks and naming all the chipmunks she saw. That night, we made pasta and played Uno until she started falling asleep mid-turn. It felt like the first time in forever we'd all been relaxed at the same time. It wasn't until the next morning that things started to feel a little off. I was the first one up. I've always been kind of a light sleeper, and the old wooden floors creaked like hell, so I tried to move as quietly as possible. I brewed a cup of coffee and took it out to the porch. The air had that cold edge to it that tells you summer's over, even if the sun hasn't quite admitted it yet. When I came back inside, I figured I'd shower before Erin or Nora got up. The downstairs bathroom was tiny, just a toilet, sink, and one of those old-school medicine cabinets with the mirror on the front. I remember wiping condensation off the mirror after the shower, then doing that thing where you check yourself out for no real reason. I leaned in to fix my hair, and that's when I saw it. A handprint. It was faint, but there, just below eye level, like someone had pressed their palm against the glass and then stepped away. The weird thing was that it wasn't fogged. It was actually clearer than the rest of the mirror, like the oils from someone's skin had repelled the steam in that exact shape. I stared at it for a few seconds, just standing there in my towel, trying to remember if maybe I'd touched the mirror earlier without realizing it. But I hadn't. I was sure of that. And more than that, no one else had been in the bathroom. The door had been shut all morning. I'd been the first one up. I even checked our bedroom door creaks like hell when it opens, and I would have heard if Aaron or Nora had moved around. I wiped the mirror again with the hand towel and the print vanished. Just like that. I didn't say anything about it. It felt too dumb to mention, especially when everything else had been so nice so far. We'd only been there for a day. I told myself it was probably left over from the cleaners, or just some weird residue from when the mirror steamed up. Still, it stuck with me. Later that afternoon, Nora came inside looking kind of quiet. She'd been out in the backyard collecting acorns or something, so I asked if she was tired. She said no, but when Aaron came in from reading on the porch and asked the same thing, Nora finally spoke up. "Someone knocked on my window last night." It was one of those moments where my brain didn't even register what she meant at first. I think I said something like, "What?" like a tree branch, and she shook her head. No, it was a knock, like a real knock. She held up her little fist and tapped the side of her hand against her arm to demonstrate. 3 times. I thought it was you or Mom, but I looked out and nobody was there. Aaron gave me a look over her shoulder, like, "Are you gonna say something?" I just shrugged. "Nora, it was probably just something falling or the wind. You sure it wasn't part of a dream?" She looked unsure. Maybe. I was really sleepy. We left it at that. We didn't want to freak her out. But Aaron brought it up to me later when Nora was outside again. "You think that's just her imagination?" she asked. "I mean, probably. She's been watching those ghost hunting YouTubers again. Still weird." I didn't say anything, but I was thinking about the mirror. I almost told Aaron then. I probably should have, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. It wasn't until the next morning that we found the footprint. And that's when everything shifted. I found it by accident. It was early again, around 6:30. I hadn't slept much. Not because anything had happened, just, I don't know. I kept waking up every couple of hours, like my body knew something my brain hadn't caught on to yet. I was up before the girls again and went upstairs to grab a hoodie I'd left in the laundry room the night before. The laundry room was at the end of the upstairs hallway, just past the bedrooms. The light switch is outside the room, which I still think is a weird choice. I flicked it on, stepped inside, grabbed the hoodie off the dryer, and then something on the floor caught my eye. A mark, a smudge. At first I thought it was just dirt. Someone must have tracked something in, but when I crouched down I could see the shape, the heel, the ball, 5 distinct toes, not a sock print. A bare foot. It was faint, but definitely there. And here's the thing that really got me. It was facing the wrong direction. Like whoever left it had been walking toward the stairs from deeper in the house, not coming in from outside, and it was the only one. No prints before it, none after. Just one, by itself. pressed into the wood like someone had stepped out of thin air. I stood there for a few seconds, just trying to make it make sense. I even checked the bottom of my own foot just to rule myself out. Dry as a bone, no dirt. I hadn't been barefoot all morning anyway. Neither had Aaron, and Nora's feet were way smaller. Still, I wiped it up with a damp paper towel. I didn't want Nora to see it and get spooked again. Or Aaron, if I'm being honest. She already seemed on edge after the window thing. She played it cool in front of Nora, but I could tell. At breakfast, I decided to test the waters a little. "You sleep okay?" I asked, mostly to Nora. She shrugged, busy demolishing a bowl of cereal. "No more weird knocks?" I said it with a little smile, trying to keep it light. She looked up, spoon halfway to her mouth. "No, but I kept thinking I heard something." Aaron looked up too. "Like what?" "I don't know. It was like little sounds, like footsteps. But I think it was just my brain being dumb." She went back to eating, and Aaron gave me that look again. Not suspicious exactly, just unsure. We spent most of that day outside, trying to distract ourselves. It helped, sort of. We took Nora on a hike around the lake trail, brought sandwiches in a cooler, and stopped to let her take photos with the disposable camera we bought at a gas station on the way in. She was finally warming up to the place again, which made me feel better. But the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about that footprint, the shape of it, the direction it was facing, the fact that it was alone. I waited until Nora was playing on the dock that evening to mention it to Aaron. I told her about the mirror too. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like I was making it up. Then finally, "Why didn't you say anything?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I was overthinking it. I didn't want to freak you out." "Okay, but," she ran a hand through her hair, "that's 2 things now. 3 if you count what Nora said. That's not nothing." "I know." We both looked out at Nora, who was crouched at the edge of the dock, tossing breadcrumbs into the water like she was summoning ducks that didn't exist. "You think someone could have been in the house?" Aaron asked. "No. I checked everything this morning. Front door was locked, windows were all shut." "What about last night?" That part stuck with me. I hadn't checked last night. Not really. We'd gone to bed around 10, watched a little TV on Aaron's laptop, then fell asleep. No alarms, no noises, nothing like that. Still, the thought crept in. What if someone had been inside? Even just for a second. That night, I triple-checked the locks. Front door, side door, back door. Even the windows, which were all painted shut anyway. I slid a dining chair under the knob of the back door like I'd seen in movies, even though I wasn't totally sure that did anything. Aaron watched, but didn't say anything. I think she was glad I was doing it. We all went to bed a little earlier than the night before. Nora wanted to keep the hallway light on, which wasn't like her, but we said yes, just in case. The upstairs bathroom light was motion censored and kept flicking on whenever the cat walked past it, which scared the crap out of me at 2 a.m. I didn't sleep well again. I kept hearing things, soft creaks, the wind through the trees, the usual noises of an old house settling, but now every little sound felt sharp, like it meant something. Around 3, I got up to pee. I didn't want to, but I had to. The bathroom was cold and smelled faintly of old soap and the peppermint stuff Nora uses in her hair. I didn't look in the mirror. When I stepped back into the hallway, I froze. For a second, I thought I saw something move at the far end, just past the laundry room. Not a person, more like a shadow shifting where there shouldn't be one. But when I blinked, it was gone. I told myself it was my eyes adjusting to the dark. I even walked down there and flipped the light on, just to prove it. Nothing. Empty. Still, I didn't sleep after that. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning. At breakfast, Erin said she thought she heard a thump in the night, like something falling, but nothing was out of place. Nora seemed fine, if a little quieter than usual. She kept looking toward the stairs like she was waiting for something to come down them. And that's when I decided to call the rental owner. Just to ask. Not to accuse anyone of anything, just to ask. If anyone else had stayed here recently. If there was anything we should know about the place. I expected a cheerful, "Oh, it's just the pipes," kind of answer. What I got instead was a long pause. Then the owner cleared his throat. "There may have been a situation with the last guests," he said. "Why do you ask?" I didn't even know what to say. "You should have told us that when we booked," I finally said. "I didn't think it would matter," he said quietly. "They were supposed to leave 2 weeks ago, but they brought someone extra, someone who wasn't on the booking. And they never officially checked out." I felt cold, just numb. "What do you mean they never checked out?" "They just stopped answering," he said. "We assumed they left. The cleaners said the place looked empty." "But what if they didn't?" He didn't answer that. And I didn't ask again. I didn't tell Erin right away. I mean, what was I even supposed to say? "Hey, the guy who owns this house casually admitted that someone stayed here and might never have left. But don't worry, he's pretty sure the place was empty." I just stood in the kitchen for a while, phone still in my hand, pretending to scroll through emails. Erin was out on the porch with her tea. Nora was drawing at the table, doing that thing where she talks to herself in little made-up voices. Everything looked so normal. I didn't want to shatter it, not yet. So I waited. Instead, I went upstairs and checked the entire house again, every closet, every cabinet, even under the beds, which felt a little childish, but I did it anyway. I opened the attic hatch in the hallway, nothing but dust and insulation. I knocked on the walls. I pushed at the back panels of the linen closet just in case it had some creepy crawl space no one told us about. Nothing. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Later, I asked the owner for more details, trying to keep the conversation casual. He said the original guests were a couple from Connecticut, early 30s. They booked for a week, then extended their stay 3 more days. But the cleaner showed up after checkout and found the place empty, no sign of anyone, no personal stuff left behind. "But the neighbors said they brought someone else," he told me. "A third person, younger guy, I think. Someone who didn't show up on the reservation." I asked if he'd ever gotten in touch with them again. He just said no, that they stopped answering emails and calls, that he filed a complaint with the rental platform, but nothing came of it. I asked if he called the cops. He hesitated again. "No signs of anything illegal," he said. "The house was clean, doors locked, nothing broken. If they left someone behind, they must have come back for them. I hung up without saying much. I was trying to keep it together for Nora, who had started asking if we could go home early. She didn't say why, and I didn't push. But I think she felt it too, the tension that had started filling up the space between us, like humidity before a storm. That night, everything came to a head. It started just after midnight. I'd been in bed for hours but hadn't managed to sleep. Erin was turned away from me, completely still, which usually meant she was awake too. The house was dead quiet. No wind, no creaks. Even the old pipes had gone silent. And then 3 soft knocks. Not on our door, on Nora's. I sat up straight. Erin did too at the exact same time. She looked at me wide-eyed. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. We both got out of bed without speaking. I didn't even grab anything, just moved. Nora's room was across the hall. The door was shut, and there was no sound on the other side. I knocked gently and opened it before she answered. She was sitting up in bed, covers pulled to her chest. "There was someone at my door," she said quietly. "I heard them." I looked around her room. No open windows, nothing moved, no sign of anything again. But it wasn't just the knock this time. There were smudges on the door, like fingerprints, right at her height, 5 of them, smeared slightly like someone had run their hand down the wood. Erin saw them too. I looked over and she was already pulling Nora's suitcase out from under the bed, stuffing clothes in without folding anything. "We're leaving," she said. And honestly, I didn't argue. I helped pack. We didn't talk much, just moved. Nora was shaking, but she didn't cry. I told her to keep her hoodie on, and she nodded like she was trying not to fall apart. She looked older than 9 all of a sudden. We were in the car in less than 15 minutes. The sun wasn't even close to up yet. As we pulled away, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone step out onto the porch behind us. Nothing. We drove to a diner about 30 miles south, one of those 24-hour ones you forget exist until you need one. The coffee was awful and the eggs were rubbery, but I didn't care. Erin and I sat across from each other, silently staring at our plates, while Nora drew ghosts on her napkin. I finally told Erin what the owner had said. She didn't say much, just, I knew something was off. After breakfast, we booked a hotel closer to Portland and stayed there the next 2 nights. We didn't go back to the lake house, not even to check out properly. I sent the owner a message and left the keys under a flower pot on the porch. He messaged back 2 days later, just, understood. That was it. Nora didn't want to talk about what happened. We tried gently, but she shut down every time we brought it up. I think part of her was afraid we'd tell her she imagined it, and part of her was afraid we'd say she didn't. The weirdest part? A week after we got home, a disposable camera roll came in the mail. No note, just a cardboard sleeve with Nora's name on it. We hadn't developed the one from the trip yet. I figured maybe Erin did it and forgot to mention it. But she swore she didn't. We opened the sleeve together. It was the same camera, all right, Nora's handwriting on the little sticker, and most of the pictures were hers. Trees, chipmunks, the lake, a blurry one of me flipping a pancake. Then came the last 5. One was a photo of the upstairs hallway taken at night, it looked like. No flash. Almost completely dark except for the faint outline of the railing. The next was Nora's bedroom door, closed. No one in the frame. Then the bathroom mirror, not the whole room, just the mirror, centered perfectly. And then the attic hatch, shot from below. The final one was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was black, almost entirely, except in the center, where there was something, a shape. It looked like a person crouched low to the ground, as if they were ducking under something. You could barely see it, but the eyes caught the flash. They were open, and they were looking directly into the camera. I didn't tell Nora about the photos. I mean, how could I? She was just starting to seem normal again, eating better, sleeping through the night, laughing at dumb cartoons. Every now and then she'd get quiet for no reason, or jump at small noises, but I figured that was just going to take time. Same for Erin. She threw herself back into work like nothing happened. She never brought up the house again. She wouldn't even say the word lake. But I couldn't let it go, not completely. At first I tried. I buried the camera envelope in a junk drawer, stopped checking the rental listing, made myself stop going over every detail in my head, but it was like my brain refused to move on. I'd be driving to work and suddenly wonder if the camera had a timer function, if someone could have taken those photos without Nora knowing. One night I got so fixated, I pulled the camera back out and checked the model online. Disposable Kodak fun saver, no timer, no remote. You can't take pictures without someone physically clicking the button. So who took them? It ate at me in a slow, quiet way. I didn't tell anyone how much time I was spending thinking about it, especially Erin. She already thought I was spiraling, and maybe I was. 3 weeks after we got back, I called the rental owner again. I told myself I just wanted closure, that if I could get one more solid answer, I could finally drop it. He picked up on the second ring, sounded groggy. I apologized for bothering him, said we'd stayed in the house last month and I just had some follow-up questions. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're the one with the kid." I said yes. Another pause. "Is she okay?" he asked, genuinely, not like small talk. It sounded like someone who actually wasn't sure if she'd made it out all right. "She's fine," I said, mostly. He sighed like that answer made him feel worse, not better. "I should have taken it off the market," he said. "What do you mean?" He told me that after we left, the next guests lasted one night, a couple with a dog. They messaged him the next morning and said the place had a weird energy, that the dog wouldn't go upstairs, that they kept hearing movement in the walls. He refunded them, no argument, just sent the money back. "Was there anything in the house when you went back?" I asked. "After us?" "No," he said. "It was clean, locked up, same as before." But he didn't sound sure. He didn't hang up until I asked him flat out if anyone had ever died there. He said no, not as far as he knew, but the way he said it, "not as far as I know," made my skin crawl. That was the last time I spoke to him. I thought about reporting it. I even looked up how. There's no real process for "something's wrong with this Airbnb," not unless someone gets hurt, and technically no one had. Still, I filed a complaint through the site, just to have it on record. I kept it vague, said the place made us uncomfortable, that my daughter didn't feel safe there. They sent back a generic email thanking me for the feedback. A few days later, I checked the listing again. It was gone. Just removed completely, like it never existed. That should have made me feel better. I thought it would. It didn't. Because here's the thing. Once you've experienced something you can't explain, really can't, it kind of breaks your brain a little. You start second guessing everything, every noise in the house, every open door you don't remember opening. I started waking up at 3:15 every night, not exactly on the dot, but close enough to feel weird. And there were other things too, small things. One morning, I found a wet footprint in the hallway outside our bathroom. No one had showered yet. Aaron brushed it off, said maybe the cat had stepped in the sink, even though he never does that. But I checked his paws. They were clean. Another night I found a handprint on the back of our bedroom mirror, a small one, like a child's. I wiped it off without telling anyone. I don't know why I didn't say anything. Maybe I thought if I didn't name it, it couldn't grow. But Nora noticed something was wrong. She didn't ask questions, not directly, but she started sleeping with the light on again. She asked if she could move her bed so it didn't face the window. She started drawing things that made me uncomfortable. Long hallways, dark doors, shadowy figures standing just out of frame. Sometimes she'd cross them out with so much pressure the paper would tear. Aaron saw one of them and asked if everything was okay at school. Nora said yeah, but she wouldn't meet her eyes. Then, one night, about a month after we got back, she came into our room. It was just after midnight. I was still awake, lying there with that familiar tight feeling in my chest. "Can I sleep with you guys?" she whispered. Aaron moved over and pulled back the blanket without even asking why. Once she was settled between us, I asked as gently as I could, "Did you have a bad dream?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "He's still looking." I didn't know what that meant. I wanted to ask, but Aaron shushed me and rubbed her back until she fell asleep. I just stared at the ceiling. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day I went back to that junk drawer and pulled out the camera envelope again. I looked at that last photo for a long time, the shape crouched low, the pale dots of its eyes. And I realized something I hadn't before. The camera was angled upward, like someone had been holding it at chest level and pointed it toward the floor, not standing height, not eye level. It had been taken by a child, which means Nora didn't forget taking it. She lied. I didn't confront Nora right away. I thought about it, I even rehearsed what I'd say, but something about the idea made me hesitate. She was just a kid. I didn't want to accuse her of lying. I just wanted to understand. For a couple days, I kept watching her, not in a creepy way, just noticing. She was still herself mostly. She laughed at cartoons. She told me when her class hamster died like it actually bummed her out. But there were moments when she seemed far away, like I'd ask her a question and she'd blink before answering, like she had to come back from wherever she'd gone. I asked her about the trip once, just lightly while we were in the car. "What was your favorite part of the lake house?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, "The dock." "Not the house?" She shook her head. The house felt weird. I nodded. "You never told me what you saw. That night, someone knocked." She glanced at me but didn't say anything. "Nora?" "I didn't see anything," she said. "That's the problem." I let it go after that. That night, after she went to bed, I sat on the edge of the couch with the photo in my hands again. That final one, the dark one. I brought it close to the lamp and studied every inch of it. The shape was so hard to define. You couldn't make out a face, just the idea of one. The way it crouched low, not like it was scared, more like it was waiting. And the eyes, that's what stuck with me. They didn't look human. Not in a dramatic way, no glowing or unnatural features. Just blank, wide. Like whatever it was didn't understand what it was looking at, or maybe didn't care. I flipped the photo over, just white on the back. I held it up to the light, thinking maybe there was something written on it in pencil, but there wasn't. Still, I couldn't shake the idea that something had posed for that photo, that it had looked into the lens on purpose. After that, the dreams started. Not violent or gory, just strange, quiet. The kind of dreams that feel more like memories than nightmares. In one of them, I was standing in the upstairs hallway of the lake house, barefoot. I wasn't doing anything, just standing there, looking toward the laundry room. And some shape was crouched in the shadows at the end, just barely visible. I couldn't move, I couldn't blink. And the longer I stood there, the more I became aware that it was the one watching me. I'd wake up sweating, heart racing, sometimes halfway off the bed like I was trying to get away from something. I started sleeping with the hallway light on again, just like Nora. A few nights later, I came home late from work. Erin was already in bed. Nora was supposed to be too, but when I passed her room, I saw the light was still on. Not the overhead light, just the little desk lamp she sometimes used to read. I knocked and opened the door. She was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, facing the mirror. The same kind we'd bought her last year. Full-length, oval, mounted on a wooden stand. She didn't look at me. "What are you doing?" I asked. She turned slowly, like she was waking up from something. Her eyes were glassy. "I thought I saw something," she said. "In the mirror?" She nodded. I sat down beside her. "Like what?" "I don't know." She pulled her knees up. It wasn't clear. Like it was trying to look like me, but it didn't know how. That sentence hit me harder than it should have. It was too specific, too real. "Have you seen it before?" She hesitated, then shook her head. But I didn't believe her. She didn't sleep in her room that night. I let her stay on the couch with a blanket and some cartoons. Erin didn't ask why. She just looked at me like she already knew something was happening that we didn't know how to stop. That weekend, I went looking for the other family, the one who stayed at the house before us. I know that sounds crazy, but I couldn't stop thinking about what the rental owner said, that they brought someone else, someone who wasn't supposed to be there, and that they just left. I still had the booking confirmation in my email. I used it to check the listing again, not the live one. It was gone. but the archived version that Google had cached. From there I got the name of the property management company, just a generic-sounding outfit that handled a bunch of vacation homes in the area. I called and pretended to be someone looking to book for next year, asked if the lake house was available. The woman on the phone was polite but confused. "That listing's been pulled," she said. "Do you know why?" She paused. "I'm not really allowed to discuss that." "Was there a police report or something?" "Sir, is this about a prior stay?" I didn't answer. I think my silence said enough. Then, after a long pause, she lowered her voice. "There was an incident," she said, "but it didn't happen to any of our guests, not officially." "What does that mean?" "I can't say more. I really can't. But, off the record, if I were you, I wouldn't go looking." I hung up before she could say anything else. The next day, I noticed something strange with Nora's drawings. She'd started a new sketchbook. Same stuff at first: animals, trees, cartoon characters. But halfway through they started getting darker. Literally, thick black crayon covering half the page. Stick figures with their faces scribbled out. A little girl standing in front of a mirror, with two shadows behind her. In one, she'd drawn the lake house. I recognized the shape of it right away, but all the windows were blacked out, and something was crouched on the roof. I asked her about it. She said, "That's not the house, that's the copy." I didn't ask what that meant. Later, after she went to bed, I flipped through the sketchbook again. The last page was blank, except for one sentence written in shaky pencil. "He remembers where we went." That night, I locked every door in the house. But I didn't sleep. And I kept the lights on. It's been almost a year since the lake house. I've rewritten this story in my head 100 different ways, some versions scarier, some more rational. I kept thinking that maybe, if I could just land on the right version, I'd finally be able to file it away in that mental drawer where we keep all the weird, half-remembered stuff from our lives. But I'm starting to realize that's not how it works. Some things don't get tied up neatly. They don't offer you closure. They just end. And if you're lucky, you get to decide when. So this is me doing that, ending it. Here's what finally happened. A few weeks after I found Nora's drawing, the one that said he remembers where we went, I sat down with her. Really sat down, no distractions, no jokes. Just me and her on the back porch one late Saturday morning, while Aaron was out getting groceries. I didn't try to sneak up on it. I didn't treat it like a trap or a therapy session. I just asked her, "What do you remember about that trip?" She was quiet for a while. I let her take her time. Eventually she said, "I remember feeling watched." "By what?" She looked down at her knees. "Not a person." I nodded. "Was it in the house?" Another long pause. "I think it followed us there. Or maybe it was already there, and we brought something it liked." I didn't ask her to explain. Honestly, I don't think she could have. But then she said something I'll never forget. "It didn't want to hurt us. It just wanted to stay." That shook me more than anything else. Because it made a strange kind of sense. We kept waiting for something violent to happen, but it never did. It just lingered, observed, left pieces of itself around like forgotten laundry. That handprint, the knock, the photo, whatever it wasn't trying to scare us. It was trying to settle in, like it was learning how to be human by mimicking us. After that conversation, things changed. Slowly, but they did. Nora started sleeping in her room again. The lights stayed on for a while, but eventually she stopped needing them. The drawings became brighter, less dark, less chaotic. The shadows shrank. Her therapist said she was processing well. I think that's probably true. Aaron and I talked more too, really talked. For a while, we'd both been pretending it hadn't affected us. But it had. It's hard to explain what it feels like to be scared in your own home, not of a person, but of the possibility that the world is thinner than you thought, that there's something just beyond it, watching. She told me she'd been having dreams too, mostly of doors she couldn't open, or mirrors that showed the wrong room behind her, but they'd faded over time, just like mine did. There were no more footprints, no more smudges, no photos in the mail. And still it lingered in the back of my head. He remembers where we went. It almost felt like a warning, but it also felt like a truth. Because even as life started to feel normal again, school drop-offs, Saturday chores, lunch leftovers in the fridge, I couldn't forget that house. So one day, I went back, alone. I didn't tell Aaron. I didn't even plan it, really. I had a work trip a couple towns over and realized I was only an hour and a half from the lake. I told myself I just wanted to see if the house was still there. If maybe I'd built it up in my head. It was still there. Same white siding, same green shutters, same porch swing, swaying slightly in the breeze like someone had just gotten up from it. There was no for rent sign, no sign of life at all. Just tall grass and a bird bath full of leaves. I parked down the road and walked up to the edge of the property, but I didn't go in. I just stood there. And I don't know how to explain this part in a way that doesn't sound made up, but I'll try. I felt something let go. It wasn't dramatic, no rush of wind, no voices in the trees, just a lightness, like tension I didn't even realize I was carrying had loosened from my chest. Whatever had been there, it wasn't anymore. I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel anything really, just tired. I stood there for a few more minutes, took one last look at the windows, and walked back to the car. On the drive home, I didn't replay anything in my head. I didn't try to dissect it. I didn't feel the need. That was the last time I thought of the lake house in the way I used to, as a threat, as something unfinished. Now, when I think of it, I mostly just feel a little sad. Not for us, for it. Because if I'm right, if it was trying to learn, trying to be close to something it couldn't quite touch, then maybe all those little things weren't warnings. Maybe they were attempts, bad ones, sure. Unnerving, but not malicious. Just lonely. And maybe we were the first ones to really see it. Maybe that's why it followed us home for a while. Maybe we reminded it of something. I'll never know. I'm okay with that. Nora's fine. She still draws, but it's all sunshine and animals now. Last week, she brought home a school project about her favorite place in nature, and she picked the lake. When I asked her why, she said, because it was quiet, and I like quiet places now. I just smiled. I think part of her remembers more than she says, but maybe that's her way of letting it go too. Erin and I are better. We talk more. We're planning a trip this fall somewhere warmer. Maybe a beach this time. No cabins, no attics. Just sand and sun and overpriced ice cream. And me? I sleep through the night again. Not always, but often. The mirror's clean. The house feels like ours again. Sometimes when it's late and the house is still, I'll catch myself listening, just for a second, just to make sure the silence is empty. It always is, and that's enough. So yeah, that's what happened. That's all of it. Not a ghost story, not exactly. Just a strange thing that happened to a regular family in a quiet house by a quiet lake. And we're okay now. We really are.